Dear colleagues, dear guests, I suggest we start today's conference.
Queridos colegas, queridos amigos, vamos a empezar esta conferencia, este seminario de hoy. Bienvenidos a todos los representantes de los medios de comunicación, además, por supuesto, de diputados, a todos los expertos que han venido, que han aceptado nuestra invitación. Y es un gran placer organizar, en nombre de socialistas y demócratas, este acto de hoy para hablar de lo que se llama las noticias falsificadas, el fake news, que es un fenómeno global, pero no es nuevo, ¿eh? La novedad es hasta qué punto se puede difundir rapidísimamente en Internet y con los medios sociales, las redes sociales, ese tipo de noticias falsas, ¿no? Y la manera en la que sirve para manipular a los lectores con relatos que se difunden a sabiendas de ser falsos. Ya tuvimos un debate hace poco en esta institución, por primera vez, sobre este tema, fue justo antes del verano, y ahí hablamos ya de las preocupaciones que rodean a esto y pedimos que se tomaran medidas. Tenemos un nuevo comisario, una nueva comisaria para el mundo digital, María Gabriel, que ha sido eurodiputada hasta hace muy poco, la conocemos, y ya anunció la semana pasada que va a lanzar un grupo de expertos precisamente.
It's still premature to talk about tough measures or hard law on the EU level to deal with incorrect news reports often spread online. So the European Commission is also, after our calls, expected to announce measures that will set out common requirements for when firms should remove illegal content that is issued on their online platforms. And we have asked the Commission in spring to make sure that these measures are part of new binding legislation that will create common rules across the European Union. Both the tech companies, on the other hand, expressed already concerns that and warned that the new legislation should not limit an existing EU law that guarantees that they are not legally responsible for what people post on their sites. We have different practices in some member states, such as Germany. We saw at the beginning of this year the new legislation which social media firms can be fined up to 50 million euro if they do not remove illegal content from the and hate speech from the online. Some member states wish and are planning to follow this example. And fake news is actually quite an element in the deeper democratic challenge. I used to be a journalist. I attend many conferences discussing fake news and hate speech and trying to find out what can we do on an EU level to harmonize legislation and, of course, to somehow limit and abolish the illegal content. People also have extreme difficulties, especially if I look at the young generation. We had a statistic that 1/3 of young Europeans, the only source of the information is Facebook. And they have big difficulties to, of course, see or distinguish what is fake news and what is real news. Some media are having practices. We had an example of BBC or France TV during the election campaign that established critical media reporting, fact finders inside the media desks, how to make traditional media also playing the role to remain credible and to counter the fake news and hate speech also. So we have the very good speakers, the panel of distinguished guests. I'm happy to host all of you here. Joe Weidenholzer is my co-host. We have two working groups in an S&D working group on extremism and digital agenda, so we will together co-host this event in the afternoon. I will be moderating till 3 o'clock. Just the technical information, we have 4 languages available. You can follow in 4 languages. We have also a web stream of the event, so for those who will be watching us online, they can also follow. And the first speaker is sitting close to the computer, that is his name, Professor Mercier Arnaud, Professor of Political Communication coming from Paris University, Panthéon-Assas, and holds a PhD degree on political science. He's also a president and chairman of the board of the website The Conversation France, and he conducts research on journalism, social media, and electoral context and political communication, and he has recently published Political Campaigning on Twitter, the EU elections 2014 in the digital public sphere. And the topic of today's your presentation is especially how to tackle fake news, hate speech during the election campaigns. In several member states, we had election campaigns, but there is still Germany coming. In my country, Slovenia, we have also in October presidential elections, so it will be very interesting to hear your experience, and especially how you did it in France. Please, Professor Mercier, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I have chosen to speak in French because I am French, and it's authorized. So, fake news, durant les récentes élections européennes, c'est ce qui m'a été demandé de traiter comme sujet. Alors, pour commencer à répondre à la question de l'impact possible des fake news sur un scrutin national, je pense qu'il faut être précis sur les termes. Parce que y a quelque chose qui est troublant, c'est l'inflation de l'usage du terme fake news, qui devient beaucoup trop synonyme, à mon sens, de propos contestés ou contestables, voire d'arguments maintenant pour décrédibiliser la parole de tout adversaire. Il est donc important, à mon avis, d'essayer de conserver une cohérence terminologique pour ne pas tomber dans la généralisation abusive. Tout ce qui serait approximatif deviendrait une fake news, et donc ne pas tomber dans le grand relativisme si on veut vraiment affronter cette question. Alors d'abord, un petit retour sur des mensonges ou des approximations en contexte électoral. Il est évident que pendant les campagnes électorales, il circule énormément de présentations déformées des données chiffrées, par exemple. Circulent également des discours très approximatifs qui jouent avec les différentes perceptions possibles d'un même problème. Les contenus de ces discours sont dictés soit par l'aveuglement idéologique ou par la mauvaise foi, et donc sont très éloignés de toute idée de vérité et de sincérité. Et souvent, bien sûr, les points de vue des adversaires sont déformés, simplifiés, caricaturés. Je dois dire, y compris dans une enceinte parlementaire, devant sans doute des gens élus, que malheureusement, ce type de situation correspond à l'ordinaire de nombreuses campagnes électorales. Ces discours non sincères jouent sur des stéréotypes, des approximations, des simplifications abusives. Et ils sont souvent associés, évidemment, à des postures démagogiques au nom d'un principe simple. Tous les arguments sont bons. Et on en a un très bon exemple récemment, c'est évidemment la campagne référendaire de ceux qui étaient partisans du Brexit en Grande-Bretagne, qui a offert une très large gamme de tous ces arguments fallacieux. Les pseudo-économies miraculeuses du budget de l'État britannique qui, de plus, irait illico au renforcement du système de santé publique, dont je rappelle que les tenants de cet argument ont dit le lendemain même de l'élection, le lendemain, ah oui, non, on a été mal compris, on n'a jamais dit qu'on aurait tout de suite une telle économie en faveur de... Donc le lendemain même, ils se reniaient. Et on a également les assimilations entre, par exemple, libre circulation des travailleurs européens et la vague migratoire à propos de la crise syrienne. Alors parmi ces dizaines d'exemples, je voulais juste en revenir sur un, c'est celui de la décision de la Cour européenne de justice de juin 2016 concernant l'arrestation et l'emprisonnement d'une immigrante ghanéenne à Calais par la police française. La presse britannique tabloïde, qui était très adversaire, très favorable au Brexit, et le parti UKIP notamment, se sont emparés de cette décision pour dire que tout emprisonnement de migrants illégaux devenait interdite par la folie de la Cour. Et madness. Et donc que la vague migratoire allait perdurer et s'aggraver, que les États devenaient sans défense, et que cette décision fragilisait la possibilité pour le Royaume-Uni de contrôler l'immigration illégale. Alors, de mon point de vue, ça, c'est un mensonge, mais ce n'est pas ce qu'on appellera des fake news. C'est un mensonge puisque cette décision concerne l'espace Schengen, que la Grande-Bretagne n'en fait pas partie, que l'enfermement n'a jamais été interdit par cette décision de la Cour. La Cour rappelle juste que la directive 2008-115 prévoit que c'est un franchissement illégal, que c'est dans le pays où le franchissement illégal de la frontière a eu lieu que doit être reconduit quelqu'un qui est pris après dans l'espace Schengen dans un autre pays. Bref, on est dans une généralisation totalement abusive. Il est clair que l'arrêt de la Cour ne dit absolument pas ce que UKIP en a fait. On peut tomber également dans l'hyperbole, l'exagération grossière, qui sont le corollaire des discours politiques populistes. Et on a d'autres exemples pendant la campagne européenne avec les partis populistes italiens. Je pense par exemple à la Ligue du Nord, qui font de la monnaie unique l'objet de la faim, du chômage, et même chez un partisan du nazisme. Hein, allons-y, plus c'est gros, mieux ça passe. Hein. Bon. Alors, toutes ces exagérations, on peut aussi évoquer Donald Trump et l'idée de dire qu'à partir du moment où il va fabriquer un mur à la frontière mexicaine, ce sont les Mexicains qui vont payer. Bon. Donc ce type de manœuvres manipulatrices sont l'objet même, j'allais dire, de la démarche de la dispute argumentative dans l'espace démocratique, puisqu'on va avoir une forme d'éthique de conviction qui nous fait voir les choses d'une certaine façon, qui essaye de se convaincre soi-même quand on prononce ces faits que ça va pouvoir arriver, face à, de l'autre côté, une éthique de vérité qui consiste à dire qu'on ne peut pas avancer un argument s'il n'est pas vrai. Et les médias traditionnels participent à ce débat en choisissant de le contrer. C'est le fameux fact-checking, hein, cette idée que justement ils sont là pour vérifier les faits, ou au contraire peuvent choisir d'épouser un tel mouvement. C'est le cas de la presse tabloïde britannique, j'ajouterais hélas. Alors, du coup, une fois que j'ai rappelé ça, qu'est-ce que, de mon point de vue, mérite d'être appelé fake news? Je pense qu'il faut garder le terme de fake news, si on veut être un peu cohérent au niveau conceptuel, en l'associant à ce que j'appelle un nouvel écosystème de l'information. Je pense qu'il y a effectivement une clarté à avoir pour ne pas mettre sur le même plan des manœuvres électorales manipulatrices liées à des exagérations, des approximations, des jeux sur les peurs, etc., des ambiguïtés, avec ce qui est des tentatives de déstabilisation du système démocratique lui-même, du jeu démocratique, c'est-à-dire la diffusion de fausses informations qui n'ont aucun lien en aucune façon avec la réalité, donc les fake news. Et ce nouvel écosystème de l'information, il est associé directement à l'émergence des réseaux sociaux numériques, comme ça a été rappelé par notre présidente de séance, qui forment désormais un accès privilégié à l'information, notamment chez les jeunes générations, en effet, et notamment Facebook, vous l'avez rappelé. Les réseaux sociaux numériques offrent au moins 4 grandes caractéristiques qui produisent, à mon avis, un changement profond de l'écosystème de l'information. Première caractéristique, ce sont des plateformes qui permettent à chacun de prendre la parole, de se faire à la fois producteur et diffuseur d'éléments dignes ou non, ça dépend bien sûr, d'être qualifiés d'information. Deuxième caractéristique, ces plateformes, et singulièrement Facebook, vu son succès, deviennent de plus en plus des points d'entrée dans un univers que les internautes considèrent comme étant de l'information, alors même que ce sont les amis, entre guillemets bien sûr, et les algorithmes qui contribuent à filtrer puissamment l'information reçue et partagée, et pas un travail journalistique de hiérarchisation des faits. Et que ce travail, cette hiérarchisation par les amis et les algorithmes, filtre puissamment l'information selon une logique d'enfermement progressif au sein de communautés d'affinités. Et là, on est très très loin d'un idéal d'espace public délibératif tel qu'a pu le théoriser Jürgen Habermas, évidemment. Troisième caractéristique, ces réseaux sont des outils de désintermédiation journalistique, puisque les médias traditionnels n'ont plus le monopole de l'offre d'information au profit de sites dits alternatifs qui se présentent eux-mêmes comme alternatifs. Alternatifs à quoi? C'est alternatif justement à l'éthique journalistique. Et quatrième caractéristique, les contenus reçus et partagés baignent dans un brumeux mélange d'actualités sérieuses, de blagues, de rumeurs qui peuvent aller jusqu'au complotisme. Et donc, si je résume, tel qu'ils fonctionnent, les réseaux sociaux numériques diminuent l'influence de tiers médiateurs, ceux qui sont les sachants, ceux qui sont censés posséder un certain savoir. Ils permettent au contraire à chacun de se sentir autorisé et légitime à produire des contenus qualifiés d'information, et ils permettent de partager ces contenus entre gens convaincus des mêmes idées, qui se confortent donc mutuellement dans leurs opinions. Et c'est dans ce contexte global qu'apparaissent les fausses informations, les fake news, porteuses là aussi d'au moins 4 caractéristiques à mon sens. Première caractéristique de ces fake news, elles sont journalisées. C'est un néologisme en langue française, je ne sais pas comment les traducteurs choisiront de le traduire, mais journalisées au sens où leur format ressemble à ceux du journalisme traditionnel. Donc ça a l'air d'être de l'information, ça a l'air d'être fait comme les journalistes le font. Mais c'est fait pour ça au nom d'une logique dite, si on prend un terme qui est malheureusement bien utilisé dans la fachosphère, donc dans les réseaux d'extrême droite en Europe, c'est fait au nom d'une logique dite de réinformation. C'est-à-dire une logique qui consiste à prendre le contre-pied des médias traditionnels, considérés comme détestés et détestables. Et bien sûr, cette présentation ne respecte ni les règles déontologiques, ni le rapport à la réalité à laquelle les journalistes, eux, s'obligent. Deuxième caractéristique de ces fake news dans ce nouvel écosystème de l'information, elles sont extra-logiques, dirais-je, c'est-à-dire qu'elles sont détachées des contingences de la vérification empirique. Pire, la volonté des médias ou des autorités du savoir, les types experts, professeurs, chercheurs, etc., donc leur tentative de rétablir la vérité conduit à renforcer la croyance de certains qui croient à ces fake news. Puisqu'il y a un rejet préalable des élites, du système, des médias, du politiquement correct, enfin vous connaissez toutes ces expressions très larges, utilisées comme figure de détestation. Et donc, comme il y a un rejet préalable de ces élites, eh bien, il suffit que des membres de ces élites essayent de rétablir la vérité pour qu'on croie qu'au contraire, c'est la preuve que ces fake news sont bien vraies, puisque ça a l'air de déranger le système. Donc, ceux qui prennent pour de vraies informations les fake news le font justement parce que ces infos diffèrent de ce que les médias affirment, ou même, pire encore, au nom du complot, ce que les médias ne diraient pas, feraient sciemment silence. Troisième caractéristique, ces fausses nouvelles sont jugées d'autant plus crédibles qu'elles sont commentées et diffusées sur les réseaux sociaux numériques au sein de communautés de partage. Donc là, il y a cette dimension de... On y croit d'autant plus que justement, on le partage massivement. D'où d'ailleurs, je le signale, l'importance des bots, des robots qui fabriquent justement cette simulation d'un partage, d'une conversation, qui font croire qu'il y a un effet de masse et donc que nous sommes des milliers, voire des millions à partager la même idée, alors qu'une large partie du trafic est organisée par les bots. Quatrième caractéristique, ces fake news sont de nature déstabilisatrice. Considérant que face à un univers hostile, tous les coups sont permis pour déstabiliser le système. Cet univers hostile, c'est celui des valeurs morales qui proscrivent la xénophobie, l'intolérance religieuse, l'exaltation de la violence. C'est celui des valeurs démocratiques qui pose comme fondatrice la liberté individuelle, la liberté des échanges, le vote et la loi de la majorité dans le respect des minorités. Cet univers hostile est désigné comme ennemi sous un vocable unificateur. C'est le système, les élites, c'est l'Europe, c'est Bruxelles, c'est la mondialisation, c'est la finance internationale. Enfin, tous les termes peuvent convenir. Alors, pour terminer, je voudrais revenir sur quelques exemples récents de déstabilisation électorale par les fake news. La campagne de Donald Trump, on le sait, a été pourvoyeuse de multiples fake news, à partir de faits avérés, comme par exemple le fait qu'il y a eu effectivement vol des emails du Parti démocrate, à partir duquel on brode et on invente des choses, où ça a été inventé totalement, comme l'affaire du Pizzagate, hein, où le Parti démocrate serait associé à un réseau pédophile. Bien. Alors, j'ai un exemple de fake news qui me paraît tout à fait étonnant, parce qu'il ne concerne pas l'élection, enfin pas la campagne, mais il concerne le résultat même de l'élection, ce qui est facilement démontrable. Voici ce que Breitbart, le site maintenant bien connu de l'extrême droite, puisque Bannon, son administrateur, est devenu, mais il a démissionné depuis, conseiller de Donald Trump. Voici la carte qu'ils ont publiée sur leur compte Facebook, annonçant, en disant, voilà, Donald Trump a gagné le vote populaire, puisque, regardez bien, si on prend les résultats par comté, seuls les comtés en bleu sont les comtés où Hillary Clinton est arrivée en tête. Et qu'est-ce que nous montre cette carte? C'est qu'il y a ce qu'ils appellent le Heartland, c'est-à-dire l'Amérique profonde, l'Amérique du centre, la vraie, et il n'y a que les bobos, les élites bien connues de Californie et de la côte Est qui ont voté pour Hillary Clinton. Or, le résultat, la vraie carte, n'est pas du tout celle-là. Voilà la vraie carte. Et vous voyez très vite qu'on n'est plus du tout dans la même coloration et que même au cœur des États-Unis, il y a des tas de comtés qui ont voté majoritairement pour Hillary Clinton. Et tout ceci a forcément un impact puisque une étude a montré, faite par le Pew Research Center auprès des Américains, que presque un quart des Américains reconnaît avoir disséminé sur ces réseaux des fake news pendant la campagne électorale. 23% au total, 16% disant qu'ils n'ont fait que diffuser des fake news en ne sachant pas que c'en était, et 14% qui avouent très, très simplement qu'ils savaient que c'était sans doute faux, mais qu'ils l'ont diffusé quand même, parce qu'ils considéraient que c'était une bonne politique que de le faire, on était en campagne électorale. Alors, pour terminer, la France, durant la campagne présidentielle, là aussi, beaucoup de fake news ont été forgés, fabriqués artificiellement et ont circulé sur les réseaux sociaux. Et la cible la plus notable des opérations d'intoxication a été Emmanuel Macron pour plusieurs raisons. Il était le candidat qui devenait le candidat favori, donc la cible à abattre. Et en plus, Emmanuel Macron avait l'inconvénient de ne pas être contre la mondialisation. Et pire encore, si j'ose dire, dans cette enceinte, il était même défenseur de l'Union européenne, c'est-à-dire quasiment un sacrilège pour les nationalistes et l'extrême droite de façon générale. Donc, des tas de fausses informations ont circulé sur lui, et notamment venant de la fameuse droite alternative, la alt-right américaine, où beaucoup de supporters de Trump se sont organisés avec notamment le forum 4chan, puis l'en faisant diffuser après sur Facebook et Twitter. On a un exemple, un journaliste a surpris cette conversation sur le forum 4chan, où ils étaient en train de discuter sur l'avantage et l'inconvénient de faire diffuser la rumeur comme quoi Emmanuel Macron avait une liaison avec la fille de sa femme, Brigitte Macron, puisque tout le monde sait ici que la grande particularité d'Emmanuel Macron est d'avoir une femme qui a 20 ans de plus que lui et qui a donc une fille qui a exactement l'âge d'Emmanuel Macron. Donc, vous voyez, la rumeur peut être tout à fait sordide. Autre rumeur malveillante, il y en a eu plein. Emmanuel Macron se laverait les mains après avoir serré la main des ouvriers. À partir d'une vidéo où on le voit revenir d'une visite dans un centre de pêche où il prend du gel hydroalcoolique pour se laver les mains, on dit « Ah, vous voyez, à chaque fois qu'il serre la main des ouvriers, il se lave les mains ». il a un compte offshore caché au fisc, j'y reviendrai. Et par exemple, sa campagne serait financée par l'Arabie Saoudite. Et là, les fake news, elle est complètement forgée, puisqu'on a même inventé un faux site, lesoir.info, qui est la réplique de la homepage du Soir, le site d'information et le journal bien connu en Belgique. Mais c'est un site, c'est un lesoir.info. Hein. Donc, on déface la homepage, on limite et on fait ça. Et du coup, Emmanuel Macron, on voit là qu'il est accusé d'être soutenu par l'Arabie Saoudite, ce qui permet, par exemple, à la nièce de Jean-Marie Le Pen, de la petite fille, pardon, de Jean-Marie Le Pen, de tweeter que c'est un scandale, etc. Et c'est là-dessus que je voulais en terminer. En fait, le tweet de Marion Maréchal Le Pen prouve qu'on a affaire à quelque chose qui est, à mon avis, un mécanisme très important et sur lequel, je pense, nos débats peuvent porter dans la manière de lutter contre. Je termine vraiment en 2 minutes. C'est un mécanisme que j'appelle de blanchiment de l'information sale. Exactement comme il y a des mécanismes de blanchiment de l'argent sale. Qu'est-ce que je veux dire par là ? C'est une technologie, enfin c'est une technique manipulatrice en plusieurs étapes que d'ailleurs la droite hyper conservatrice américaine a mis en œuvre depuis une vingtaine d'années, au moment notamment en ayant comme cible Bill Clinton. Quel est le mécanisme ? Un site ou un blog, pas très connu, peu fiable, publie quelque chose. Une fake news, une rumeur, etc. Des relais complaisants republient cette première source sur le mode « je cite ce qui a été dit dans ce blog ou ce site. Il semblerait qu'on nous dit que. » Puis, le mécanisme se poursuit, un site plus crédible, plus visible, publie à son tour l'information de celui qui publie. Et bien sûr, à chaque étape, ils ont plus de followers sur leurs comptes de réseaux sociaux, donc il y a plus de gens qui vont suivre l'info, qui vont la relayer, qui vont la republier. C'est donc ce mécanisme de blanchiment de l'information sale qui est très souvent à l'œuvre avec les fake news, puisque l'objectif n'est pas seulement de publier une rumeur pour une rumeur, de faire un, c'est de lui donner un écho, une visibilité progressive, en faisant en sorte que ceux qui sont les plus susceptibles d'être rendus visibles en publiant ça, se dédouanent. Ce n'est pas de ma faute, je n'ai fait que citer, je n'ai fait que mettre ça. Donc on a, et en plus, ces sites plus connus ajoutent une petite couche, j'allais dire, de crédibilité supplémentaire à chaque reprise. Donc on a vraiment ça, et c'est ça qui me paraît le plus important à prendre en compte, c'est la manière dont des gens, alors il y a bien sûr ceux qui publient les fake news, mais très souvent ils sont à l'étranger, ils sont derrière l'anonymat, etc. Ils sont très durs à repérer. Ce qui me paraît par contre une bonne piste, c'est de repérer ceux qui se font les relais complaisants de ce type de rumeurs, de ce type de fake news.
Thank you, Professor Mercier. The idea is, and we have planned time for questions and answers. So there is an opportunity, if you have a comment or a question to Professor Mercier, to signalize, raise hand. Yes, please, my colleague.
Thank you very much. My name is Maria Grappini. I am a member in European Parliament. I have very short question. What possibility will have to stopping these fake news? Okay, it was a very nice presentation, and I believe in your information, but what solution? Because for me it's very important. Yesterday evening, I had one message for Facebook. Okay, Mrs. Grappini, congratulations because you have $1 million. I have here this message. And of course, ask me personal data to give money, you know? It's crazy. And for democracy, it's very, very, yeah. We have election, and the citizen has this information, of course, decide after read a lot of information, and in my opinion, we have, it's possible it's not true. I don't have statistical data, but we have majority fake news, not real information. And for special, for political person, it's very difficult when we have discussion with people, because, okay, but I read, it's true, it's here. And sorry, what solution we'll have? Not for you only, it's this answer. Okay, thank you.
Is there some other question? No, you will. Just if I may add, because I think it's a very good point Maria made, and maybe I can just a little bit broaden the question. We are all politicians, occasionally or more often, it depends, subject of fake news in the media, quite often. I personally too. And we often have discussions with the journalists or with the experts, I myself, how to react. Very often you get the answer, better you don't react and then the news will disappear.
Yes.
Then it's another theory. You can, of course, if there is a clear media law, go by articles and ask for dementi, and this goes more difficult. You can go with the court, or you can go with the cynicism and humor. What would be your answer?
Sorry. First of all, I think that one way is to responsabilize more the platform like Facebook, Twitter, etc. On the fact that they are not more just a platform. No, they are media. They became media. They became media because more and more people use it as media, as a way to enter on the world of information, of news. So I think that the first answer to the coming from Facebook and Twitter, saying it's just a question of freedom of speech, etc. It's not accurate now, because they have begun to change their mind, and we will hear them. But I think that it's very important also to integrate on school, for instance, the fact that we have to learn how to use this kind of platforms for news. Also, it's another way. And for your question, of course, it's very, very difficult. The two theories exist. It's right about rumors. I think that one good way to fight against rumors is to not to say just it's not right. It's I think the more important is to destabilize the rumors, showing how it had been constructed, to show how it fails. And it's the case with Emmanuel Macron during the election campaign, because the most important fake news during this campaign was about the hashtag MacronLeaks. False name, because it was not a leaks, it was a fake news and not a leaks. But of course they have stolen some mails of members of the team of Macron. But they had been prepared to this robbery, because they have put on their team some fake count with fake news by the team of Macron. And when when they publish their fake news with real mail, they publish false real mail, if I am clear. So, and on those mails, there were some stupid speech, stupid fact, even some fact with the name of alt-right activist in America. So it was a real way to destabilize those who have created this fake news.
Thank you. Thank you. It will be a long and difficult struggle. You have a question, maybe sure, then we go for the next 4 speakers that we will not go much beyond the agenda, please.
Thank you very much for trying to make the attempt to actually define something that nobody defines while at the same time using this word all the time. Found that very interesting. My personal opinion is that while we discuss fake news now for about a year, mainstream about a year, the shape of fake news is changing. So the, let's say, the good old Trump days of fake news, in my opinion, I'm German, is not necessarily what's happening in Germany these days anymore. I think civil society has learned some tactics, smaller and bigger tactics. You know, the journalists that stand up in the press conferences and confront Mr. Trump with lies, that's a tactic, as well as fact-checking mechanisms, all these kind of things. So to a certain degree, I think the first generation of fake news as a weapon is rapidly changing in something new. That's my personal opinion. And right at the moment in Germany, I see that the most, let's say, worrying type of fake news I perceive in Germany these days is to make terms, new words, new ways of looking at the world spread into journalism in the first place. 2 days ago, we had a major discussion about politics, and journalists were asking our populists and a couple of other politicians how they think about the Islamization of Germany, which is a direct hit. Yeah, that's the way how that works. The guys in the Mediterranean Sea, the identitarians who were actively trying to turn the word NGO into like synonymous for people, you know, trying to make people flee for money from Africa. That's what I'm talking about, and I think especially journalists should be very, very, very aware of their responsibility here. That's actually just a statement, but I wonder if you...
I'm totally agree with you, but you must be aware of the fact that the problem remains for some people who are very hard to be convinced by rational arguments, by democratic values, etc. Yeah? And the far right, for instance, but not also, are far from being convinced by fact-checking. And on the contrary, and it was exactly the same problem for the way to fight against rumors, the fact that you are denouncing a rumor as a rumor convince certain person of the reality of the rumor. So it's not so easy. Of course, you are. I'm sure you are totally right. We learn each other of the precedent elections, and I think that for Germany, you benefit from Brexit, from Trump, from France, and it's great for you. But I think that the fight is not finished.
Thank you very much, Professor Mercier. I ask you to stay on the stage. Maybe there will still come some questions, but let us move now to, we started discussing what are the legislative challenges and what can be the government responses. And I mentioned before Germany case, and now I would move to Austria, as we have here a guest from Austria. This is Ingrid Brodning, the Austrian Digital Ambassador to the European Union, and I would just immediately pass you the floor. And as we have approximately half an hour, and again, question and answer session, if you can keep 4 of the next panelists in 5-6 minutes would be better, even less if possible. Thank you.
So I'm going to talk to you in English. I think we have some technical issues, so I'll introduce myself first. My name is Ingrid Brodnig. I'm from Austria, and I'm a journalist and a book author, and I recently published a book called Lügen im Netz, which means lies on the internet. So it deals with fake news, with manipulation online. Okay, there it is. So thank you for the introduction. I think that it's important to speak when we talk about fake news, not just to speak about the United States, because this is the first country everybody has in mind. There are many examples from Europe where you could see that elections were manipulated or were tried to be manipulated. As we saw in France, this did not work. Fake news don't always work as they are planned to. But I think that there are many examples of fake news in many, many countries. And if all of you would talk to each other, you would have so many examples, you would be astounded, that we do not know about. Perhaps you've heard about it, perhaps not. Italy. In Italy, last December, there was the referendum about the constitution, which did not get through. And in the weeks and months before the referendum, there were many fabricated or misleading stories. In fact, the fact-checking website Pagella Politica, which is a very important website in Italy for the public debate, it made an analysis of the social media content and which articles were the most successful on social media. And guess what? Out of the 10 most successful articles on social media containing the word referendum, 5 were fake news or misleading. And I show you this. This is their chart. 4 were fakes, and 1 was very misleading. And the most successful story about the whole referendum was a made-up article saying that 500,000 falsified ballots were found beforehand, and that the referendum will be a voter fraud. And this is a very common type of fake news. In Austria last year, we had similar stories. So many fake news target the trust in democracy, and they try to upset voters ahead of an important election. And as you can also see, some of the very successful fake news stories were also about saying no to the referendum. So I fear that we don't know enough about European fake news. We look very much to the United States. We talk not very much about Europe itself. I must agree that in Germany, the situation is not as bad as many of us had feared. I think there are several reasons for that. One of them is that Angela Merkel is clearly number 1. And in such a clear race, there's less motivation to spread wrong stories. But the situation is still not good. Just recently, the Bayerische Rundfunk, public broadcaster, published an analysis of the 10 most successful stories about Martin Schulz, your former colleague. And I'm showing you this as well. You cannot read it, but I will say that out of these 10 stories, only 3 of the most successful stories on Facebook and Twitter, only 3 of them were normal journalism. The number 1 story was a kind of not really substantiated claim about him being a multimillionaire. The number 2 story was a satire article. The number 3 story was fake news from a notorious blog. So I would not be too relieved regarding the situation in Germany when you see such charts. The thing is, as mentioned before, the term fake news only describes part of the problem, because especially in many European countries, the biggest problem are not 100% totally fabricated news. This is actually just a minority. I always call it the tip of the iceberg. Fake news are what everybody talks about it. They are fabricated news trying to profit politically or financially from them. But there is even a bigger new ecosystem of manipulative or misleading stories. And if you're really intelligent and if you want to influence the public in a rather unfair way, I would suggest to you, I don't really suggest it, but I would suggest that you don't do fake news, that you do rather misleading stories. Stories that have some true core, but then get extremely skewed, extremely, let's say, moved into an unfair direction. So we have a lot of examples where you have pictures being taken out of context, where you have quotes being taken out of context, where you have hyper-partisan media who only publish one narrative. And through repetition, these narratives sound very confirming. I will show you one example, which I wrote about a lot. It's one of the most successful stories about Angela Merkel. Perhaps the German colleagues know it. It was a story saying that Angela Merkel hopes to bring in 12 million immigrants, and it got 39 reactions, like likes, reactions, comments, shares, so it was a really high engagement rate. It was one of the most successful stories about Angela Merkel in the last year. And of course, this story is nonsense. It's not fake news. Why? Because there's some truth to it. The article has many false claims, like there's a secret paper celebrating mass immigration. Actually, there is a paper they're quoting, but they're quoting it completely wrong. And the headline in itself, that Angela Merkel is hoping to bring in 12 million immigrants, is wrong. There's no such quote from her. Actually, that's funny, because you had an example of the Daily Express. This story is also kind of like the follow-up to the Daily Express, a British tabloid. They had an article claiming that Merkel's government is hoping to bring in 12 million immigrants, and they had this quote, and then you read the whole article, but this quote isn't in there. Actually, this quote is nowhere because it doesn't exist. So we have these exaggerated headlines with claims which are not true, and then you have another, in that case, Austrian outlet who publishes such a story and is extremely successful with that. And I show you this to show that the huge field of misinformation is much more than fabrication. It's often misleading. So I would like to talk to you about two things. Why are such misleading stories so successful, and what can we do about it? Because we're also talking about the legal situation. So first of all, what can we do? What is the reason for that? So you might have recognized that when you're a politician and there are false stories about you, who believes those stories? Most often the voters who don't like you anyway. The thing is that fake news are produced that they help us feel confirmed in our beliefs. In psychology, this is called directionally motivated thinking. We know that when a fact is agreeing to our beliefs, we are rather willing to accept it. We are not really thinking about the source. This is a huge part of the problem. There's a lot of many studies about this. The second problem is the existence of echo chambers. I guess this is a topic a lot of you have heard about. There's this theory that on social media especially, it's easier and easier to find like-minded individuals. Because, for example, when you start your Facebook profile is empty. You have to give Facebook the information, who is your friend, which are the websites you like, and then you build your echo chamber around you. And additionally, again and again, we have new studies showing such echo chambers already existing. And there is other studies that show that when people discuss things in a like-minded group of people, their opinion gets like harder and more into one direction. So when left-wing thinking people discuss an issue, at the end, you can even measure that they will be even more sure of their rather left ideas, and the same goes on the right. So we have the problem that it's possible that it's easier to polarize in such echo chambers. That's the second reason here. I will just, there are many other reasons. I will show you one more again now. I think we need also to talk about emotion, because fake news or manipulative content, it's successful because of emotion. In English, there's the saying, angry people click more. We know from political scientists that emotion is a very activating, anger is a very activating emotion, and you can even measure that on the internet. There's a very interesting scientist named Timothy Ryan in the United States, and he made experiments on Facebook. He put advertisement online on Facebook and saw to which advertisement on Facebook people reacted. It was political ads. And he saw that when a political ad induces anger, people click twice as often, more than twice as often on it, compared to a more neutral message. This means when you are a political party or a new medium, it's very intelligent if you spread anger, because you will have more reactions. And then there comes the next part of it. So we see politicians like Donald Trump getting more reactions. I could go into detail of what this chart shows, but I think we don't have the time. So in many countries, you see that, for example, right-wing populists have really good interaction numbers because they work with anger. But this is the psychological side. There is a technological side to it as well. If you're on Facebook and you have an account, you don't see everything that your colleagues, friends at liked pages are posting. You only see a small fraction. And Facebook, the algorithm behind it, it has to choose somehow what it is showing to you. How does Facebook do that? We don't know everything by far, but we know a few key components of the algorithm. And one of the 3 most important components of the algorithm is engagement, the number of likes, shares, and comments. And just think about it. If your message is anger-inducing, if your message makes people angry, we know from science that you will get more clicks, more likes, more shares, more comments. And then we have a technical system which says, oh, many likes, this must be important. Let's show it to even more people. This leads to the question if the technology in itself is favoring anger-inducing content. And the thing is, we cannot really say for sure why. Independent scientists could test the algorithm for such biases, but such studies are not allowed by Facebook so far. So we are really in the dark here. These are 3 important aspects, and there are others as well. I mentioned repetition, for example. I just quickly added, the more often people read something, even if it's a false claim, the rather they think it's true. This is false illusory, called false illusory effect. So there are many things going on. Quickly to sum it up, what can we do about it? I think the situation is somewhat, let's say, disheartening, but I think there's things we can do. I know that, for example, in countries like Germany, there are ideas about laws against fake news. I myself, I have no idea how you would write such a law, how you could be able to make a legal framework around that in a democracy, which is not killing media plurality and has other problems. But I think that the enforcement of existing laws, that's something we can do, and I will get to that in a minute. I think there are 3 layers where the EU or states can do something. And the first layer are platforms. I mentioned that Facebook is not allowing a lot of research. It's actually really possible for scientists to see if algorithms have negative effects for our society. They don't even need to see the source code of the algorithm. They need to play around with it, which means they put data in the algorithm and see which data gets out. This is a type of research which is so far not allowed. You would call it audits. And I think that we need to ask the question whether we need independent audits as a kind of regulation. This is the one thing. The second thing is, I believe that more consumer choice is possible. And we need to have a debate with the platforms what they can do. For example, there is one way how Facebook is deciding what it is showing to you. Why not more ways? Why shouldn't the consumer be allowed to decide which algorithm fits him best? And I, for example, just a simple idea, we can have algorithms which help us see more plurality. I like the idea of a surprise me button, which means if you push the surprise me button on Facebook, once a day you see a content which you normally would never have seen. I myself would find it very interesting to see what people are discussing about, what people are liking, commenting, which is not in my own echo chamber. And you might say, perhaps people would not like that, but we have never had that offer. How do we know if people don't like it if it was never offered to us? So this is one of the ideas. We can do more regarding platforms, and platforms themselves can do more. Secondly, citizens. Just a few days ago, a really interesting study was published by Yale scientists. They saw that analytical thinking in the United States was one of the most important aspects how people did not fall for fake news. So those users, those voters who were very strong in analytical thinking, they less often shared or believed in fake news, even among Trump voters. And I think this shows that we don't just need digital skills, we do need them also, but education should focus on something basic like analytical thinking. Why? Analytical thinking also means not falling for the first impulse, but thinking, hey, is this really correct? Is this really a good source? So this is something we can do regarding education, and I think regarding enforcement of laws, we have very good laws in Europe, but often it's hard for the citizen to use them. There are good laws against defamation, but many victims of false news never use them. So we could have a debate about that, perhaps we talk about it. And then my third thing I would like to suggest is, of course, states themselves or the EU can do a lot to help fact-checking. And fact-checking does work. It reaches some people, perhaps not everybody, but many people are interested in facts. And I think that, for example, public broadcasters can play an important role here. So this is one thing. Also, there could be more public funding. In times where newspapers are getting smaller and smaller and newsrooms are getting smaller and smaller, it's, I think, not very logical that there will be more fact-checkers there. We see that in many countries, fact-checking initiatives are made by normal citizens, not by journalists. In my country, in Austria, we have the Presseförderung, it's press subsidies. For example, I would find it very good if press subsidies would be also available to fact-checking organizations, because it's a journalistic task they're doing, in my opinion. And secondly, I just would like to mention something I find very important. When you have this discussion and states or the EU is talking about fake news, it's often said, yeah, but we don't want a ministry of truth. And to be honest, I don't know a single European country which ever wanted to make a ministry of truth. What was the debate in many countries was whether you need to have information out there. If it's okay if an interior ministry or a public authority publishes the right information. And I think, yes, this is a good idea, because the EU has established something like that. It's the EU versus Disinformation website from the task force, the Stratcom task force you established. And for me as a journalist, this is extremely helpful. I think that member states have a right, and perhaps it even would be a really clever idea if they would start certain task forces to monitor the situation. And this is not a ministry of truth. This is more like helping journalists, helping the public understand what's going on. So to sum this up, there is no silver bullet against misleading content, but there are many steps you can do. And it all needs one thing. It needs the understanding that the internet will not, save itself. We have states, we have the EU to establish safeguards. And at this moment, there's this debate: should the state keep out of it? Should we not regulate platforms at all? For me, this debate does not make sense. In Europe, there is like every industry is regulated in some kind or some form or another. Why should the internet be the only place where we don't do that? I think it's necessary to have states which make sure that victims get enough help by the state, and which makes sure that our democracy is not under attack, at least not too much, at least not in an extent which we could do something about it. So that's my input. Thank you.
Thank you, dear Ingrid. I think that was very, very useful also. I wish I could, I don't know if that is some access to the document you were presenting, but if maybe you can share it, would be useful. But now we will have directly a view from Germany. So from
There is a question?
we have to put all 4 speakers and then we'll go to question and answer. Christian Meyer Seitz, Federal Ministry of Justice and Germany, Head of Unit, Consumer Policy in the Information Society, Telecommunications and Media Law. I will immediately pass you the floor, not waste too much time, and maybe you can already react to some ideas and suggestions of Ms. Brodnik. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the invitation and the opportunity to present a new piece of law made in Germany, the Netzwerkdurchsetzungsgesetz. And as I will talk about German law, I will hold my speech in German, but I have prepared some English slides. Im September 2015 begann das Bundesministerium für der Justiz und für Verbraucherschutz mit den 3 großen Netzwerken, mit Facebook, YouTube und Twitter, eine Taskforce einzurichten. Der Grund war, dass eben dass die sozialen Netzwerke von Hasskommentaren überquollen und dringendes Handeln geboten war, weil die Netzwerke offensichtlich nicht in der Lage waren, zu diesem Zeitpunkt im September...
Sorry. I think we don't have interpretation in English. Channel 2. Do you have interpretation in English? No, huh? We have French on channel 3, but channel 2 was just German and 1. Now we can hear. Sorry, I think you should...
Start again?
Yes.
Okay. Im September 2015 beschloss der Minister für Justiz und Verbraucherschutz in Deutschland, Heiko Maas, eben eine Taskforce einzurichten mit den großen sozialen Netzwerken Facebook, Twitter und YouTube. Der Grund dafür war, dass im Netz nach der sogenannten Flüchtlingswelle eben ausländerfeindliche, rechtsradikale, hasserfüllte Kommentare zirkulierten und die sozialen Netzwerke offensichtlich damals nicht in der Lage waren, dieser Flut von Hass und von Fake News und Behauptungen Herr zu werden. Und diese Taskforce begann im September 2015 und im Dezember 2015 unterschrieben die 3 großen Netzwerke eine Art Commitment, eine Selbstverpflichtung, in der sie sich verpflichteten, offensichtlich strafbare Inhalte binnen 24 Stunden zu bearbeiten. Und weitere Pflichten eingingen, um eben das Netz von Hassbotschaften zu befreien. In der Folgezeit wurde das Löschverhalten der sozialen Netzwerke mehrfach überprüft. Sie sehen hier das Ergebnis 2 Monitorings, und zwar einmal von Juli, August 2016 und einmal von Februar, März 2017. Und man sieht, dass eben bei Facebook, wenn ein illegaler Inhalt gemeldet wurde, nur rund die Hälfte dieser illegalen Inhalte auch gelöscht wurde, während bei YouTube eben bei dem zweiten Monitoring schon ein sehr guter Wert, nämlich 90% erreicht wurde. Bei Twitter hat auf die Beschwerde einzelner Nutzer praktisch gar nicht reagiert. Nur 1% der gemeldeten Inhalte wurde auch gelöscht. Und dieses Ergebnis wurde dann im Januar, Februar 2017 zum Anlass genommen, ein Gesetzgebungsverfahren einzuleiten, und zwar eben das Netzwerkdurchsetzungsgesetz, das vor allen Dingen erst einmal zwei grundsätzliche Bezüge hat. Zum einen gilt es für soziale Netzwerke mit mehr als 2 Millionen registrierten Nutzern. Und zum anderen betrifft es eben das unverzügliche Löschen von strafbaren Inhalten, und zwar eben Hasskriminalität, Fake News, wenn sie denn eine strafbare Handlung erfüllen, und andere rechtswidrige Inhalte. Dieses Konzept wurde relativ schnell auch in Europa der Europäischen Kommission vorgestellt, und es kam bereits Ende März 2017 zu einem Notifizierungsverfahren. Was ist nun ein soziales Netzwerk? Wir haben versucht, eine Legaldefinition des sozialen Netzwerks in das Gesetz hineinzuschreiben. Ein soziales Netzwerk hat zwei Funktionen. Es ist immer Plattformkommunikation. Entweder werden Inhalte der Öffentlichkeit zugänglich gemacht, oder aber sie werden eben mit anderen Nutzern ausgetauscht. Und das eine ist mehr das Prinzip YouTube und das andere ist das Prinzip Facebook. Und beide Formen der sozialen Netzwerke, beide Formen der Plattformkommunikation will dieses Gesetz erfassen. Was nicht erfasst werden soll, sind eben Plattformen, bei denen nicht die Kommunikation im Vordergrund steht, sondern zum Beispiel der Handel oder eben die Bewertung von Dienstleistungen, oder aber Dating-Plattformen, und auch alle journalistisch betreuten Plattformen sind nicht in dem Gesetz enthalten, denn wir meinen, dass also die traditionellen Medien, die Debatten selber überwachen können, und das tun sie ja auch, bis hin zu dem Punkt, dass sie Kommentarfunktionen sperren. Und schließlich haben wir auch eine Menge dafür getan, dass die Messenger-Dienste nicht enthalten sind, denn die Messenger-Dienste sind auch keine Plattformkommunikation, sondern Individualkommunikation. Und also mit diesen Elementen, die alle im Text und in der Begründung verankert sind, haben wir versucht, eben also das Gesetz zu schneiden auf natürlich die drei großen Netzwerke, aber auch andere neu aufkommende Netzwerke, die eben diese Plattformkommunikation bieten und dadurch eben auch diese Fähigkeit haben, einen starken Einfluss auf die öffentliche Meinung auszuüben. Und Sie werden jetzt fragen, was ist denn das Neue? Wir haben an der Rechtslage der E-Commerce-Richtlinie natürlich angesetzt. Schon die E-Commerce-Richtlinie, die ja uralt ist, von 1999, verpflichtet ja sämtliche Internetprovider, wenn ihnen illegale Inhalte gemeldet werden, die vom Netz zu nehmen. Das ist das sogenannte Notice and Action oder Notice and Takedown-Verfahren. Und dieses Verfahren ist sowieso geltendes Recht. Aber jetzt geht es natürlich um das Wie. Wie schnell müssen die Netzwerke reagieren? Es geht also um Compliance. Es geht darum, wie bestehende rechtliche Vorschriften eben umgesetzt und gelebt werden. Und da sind ja in der Tat große Unterschiede auch zwischen den Netzwerken, wie ich schon sagte. Und wir haben nun gewisse Compliance-Grundsätze in dieses Gesetz hineingeschrieben, und zwar, dass man eben offensichtlich strafbare Inhalte binnen 24 Stunden nach Eingang der Beschwerde löschen soll. Das zwingt die Netzwerke dazu, ein sehr effektives Beschwerdemanagement zu haben, was ihnen schnelle Reaktionen ermöglicht. Und bei schwierigeren Inhalten gibt es jetzt also die Möglichkeit, dass die Netzwerke entweder das eben binnen 7 Tagen prüfen können oder aber sogar, das ist im Parlament noch hinzugefügt worden, eine Einrichtung der regulierten Selbstregulierung zur Prüfung weiterreichen können. Diese Einrichtung ist eben eine private Einrichtung, die allerdings einen gesetzlichen Rahmen hat, und diese Einrichtung ist wahrhaft unabhängig, und diese Einrichtung soll die schwierigen Fälle dann lösen, und die sozialen Netzwerke sind aus der Verantwortung raus, wenn sie sich der Entscheidung dieser Einrichtungen der regulierten Selbstregulierung unterwerfen. Und insofern haben wir versucht, eine Unterscheidung zu machen zwischen den offensichtlich strafbaren Inhalten, die sehr schnell weg müssen und immer in der Verantwortung der Netzwerke bleiben, und eben der schwierigen Fälle, wo eben die Strafbarkeit nicht evident ist, sondern wo man Prüfung braucht. Das können schwierige Rechtsfragen sein oder das können auch schwierige Tatsachenfragen sein. Bei Fake News werden es vor allen Dingen Tatsachenfragen sein. Und dort eben können sich die Netzwerke, wenn sie das an diese Einrichtung, die sie natürlich bezahlen müssen, eben weitergeben, dann gänzlich aus der Verantwortung herausnehmen. Hinzu kommt, dass wir noch mehr Transparenz wollen und die bisherigen Transparenzanstrengungen von Facebook und YouTube nicht ausreichend finden mit den Transparency Reports und deswegen eben auch eine Berichtspflicht über dieses Beschwerdemanagement jetzt in das Gesetz hineingeschrieben haben, und diese Berichte werden fällig ab 1. Halbjahr 2018. Und die Compliance-Pflichten, die Einhaltung ist also mit einer hohen Geldbußenandrohung verbunden. Facebook selber kann bis zu 50 Millionen Euro oder die Netzwerke insgesamt bis zu 50 Millionen Euro bezahlen, wenn sie gegen diese Compliance-Pflichten verstoßen. Ich habe leider nicht so viel Zeit, deswegen werde ich nur noch kurz auf die anderen Punkte eingehen. Also weiterhin ist für die Rechtsdurchsetzung gegen Netzwerke, gegen also auch zivilprozessuale Klagen und so immer schwierig gewesen, dass diese Netzwerke in Deutschland überhaupt keine zustellungsfähige Anschrift haben. Und deswegen wurde eben in das Gesetz hineingeschrieben, dass sie das also ab 1. Oktober jetzt haben müssen. Und dasselbe gilt eben für den Contact Point für Auskunftsersuchen der Staatsanwaltschaft, wenn eben die Namen, die Bestandsdaten eben von postenden Usern angefragt werden. Außerdem haben wir die Rechtsdurchsetzung auch für den Verletzten verbessert. Das heißt also, der Verletzte bekommt jetzt zum ersten Mal nach deutschem Recht ein Auskunftsrecht darüber, wer der Postende ist. Ich komme zum Schluss. Wir können ja vielleicht bei den Fragen noch auf die Kritik eingehen. Wir haben uns starker Kritik erwehren müssen, insbesondere im Hinblick auf die Meinungsfreiheit und auf die Problem des Overblockings, dass die Netzwerke eben aus Angst vor Strafen zu viel löschen. Da fand ich die Bemerkung der österreichischen Kollegin hochinteressant, dass eben gerade die Erzeugung von Wut Click-Rates bringt. Und dann werden die Netzwerke sich schon selber überlegen, über ihrem Geschäftsmodell, ob sie Wut erzeugende Posts wirklich löschen, auch wenn sie vielleicht gar nicht strafbar sind. Also ich glaube, das eigene Geschäftsmodell der Netzwerke schützt uns davor, dass es zu viel Overblocking gibt. Ja, das Gesetz ist ein Experiment, es ist ein Pilot, es tritt am 1. Oktober in Kraft. Und wir werden sicher auch und gerade mit Europa noch intensiv über dieses Gesetz diskutieren. Vielen Dank für Ihre Aufmerksamkeit.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayer-Seitz. There will be still opportunity for questions and answers for everyone, but my colleague Petra Kammenwerth, coming from Germany and our chair of the Committee on Culture and Education, will unfortunately have to leave us in approximately 10 minutes, so I will pass her still the floor, and I'm sure she will not be able to avoid the digital directive that we have currently being discussed in the European Parliament, the update. So please, Petra, the floor is yours.
Ja, vielen, vielen herzlichen Dank auch an meine Vorrednerinnen und Vorredner. Ja, liebe Kolleginnen und Kollegen, liebe Mitdiskutanten, Fake News und Hassreden sind keine neue Erfindung. Sie sind nicht neu. Fake News sind gezielte Falschmeldungen, die sich eben größtenteils, haben wir schon gehört, in sozialen Medien verbreiten. In der analogen Welt hießen sie früher Zeitungsenten, Tatarenmeldungen oder einfach auch nur Propaganda. In der digitalen Welt werden sie jedoch durch sogenannte Social Bots noch wirksam verstärkt. Wir haben eben schon gehört, in welcher Art und Weise sich solche Falschmeldungen dann auch duplizieren und damit auch eine Reichweite erreichen, die den klassischen analogen Medien eigentlich in nichts nachstehen. Und insofern kann man natürlich sagen, dass inzwischen auch die Plattformen ein Stück weit die Funktion von Leitmedien durchaus übernommen haben. Es ist aber jetzt nicht die Schuld des Internets selbst oder der Struktur des Internets, dass hier Falschmeldungen oder rechtswidrige Inhalte verbreitet werden. Jede Infrastruktur kann erstmal Gutes oder Schlechtes bewirken. Und deshalb glaube ich, dass unser Fokus nicht unbedingt auf Repressionsverschärfung liegen sollte, sondern auf, ich will sagen, 3 Säulen. Einmal auf dem Bereich Bildung, Aufklärung und Prävention. Das zweite ganz wichtige Thema ist der Bereich der regulierten Selbstregulierung, der auch schon angesprochen worden ist. Und das dritte ist, es ist ja nicht so, als ob wir keine Gesetze hätten. Es muss aber das Gesetz und das Recht, was wir haben, muss auch in diesen Fällen konsequent angewendet werden. Debatten mit beleidigenden, verletzenden und rassistischen Kommentaren sind ebenfalls nicht neu. Auch die kennen wir aus früheren Zeiten. Darauf müssen wir in der analogen wie in der digitalen Welt gelassen, besonnen, aber genauso konsequent auch reagieren. Ich halte persönlich Fake News zwar für abstoßend und in weiten Teilen auch für hochgradig gefährlich für unsere demokratische Gesellschaft, aber auch das muss man sagen, sie sind bis zur eindeutigen Identifizierung als Falschmeldungen von der Freiheit der Rede und der Meinungsfreiheit gedeckt. Auch Verschwörungstheorien oder Dinge, die von uns als abseitig empfunden werden, sind von diesen Freiheiten eben halt auch geschützt. Die Freiheit der Meinung, seine Meinung zu äußern, ist und bleibt, glaube ich, überall in Europa ein hohes Rechtsgut und es genießt in all unseren Verfassungen und auch in der EU-Grundrechtecharta einen hohen Schutz. Und ich glaube, das müssen wir bei allen Diskussionen, die wir führen, auch immer mit berücksichtigen. Auch wir fordern einen konkreten Ansprechpartner für Fake News und Hetze in sozialen Netzwerken. Ich glaube, so können wir versuchen, über ein verbessertes auch Beschwerdemanagement Erfolge bei der Beschleunigung und Vereinfachung des Notice- und Takedown-Verfahrens zu erzielen. Dieser Ansatz ist relativ niederschwellig, durch Kenntnis für Verantwortung auch bei den Providern zu sorgen. Das ist übrigens ein Ansatz, den wir auch in der aktuellen audiovisuellen Mediendienste-Richtlinie verfolgen. Für den Fall, dass ein soziales Netzwerk eben keine angemessenen Verfahren vorweist, um die gemeldeten und als solche identifizierten Falschmeldungen als solche zu kennzeichnen oder gar zu löschen, sollte dann auch entsprechend Bußgeldverfahren greifen. Soziale Netzwerke müssen natürlich außerdem auch dazu verpflichtet werden, Gegendarstellungen und Richtigstellungen entsprechend zur Veröffentlichung. Das, was in der klassischen analogen Presse und in klassischen analogen Medien gilt, muss auch für solche sozialen Netzwerke gelten, nämlich das Recht auf Gegendarstellung. Konkret würde das bedeuten, dass alle, die eine Falschmeldung geteilt haben, dann den Hinweis bekommen, dass sie eine Lüge verbreitet haben. Das ist, glaube ich, technisch ohne weiteres möglich. Dem erweiterten Radius der digitalen Falschmeldung könnte so ein Stück weit auch effizient entgegengetreten werden. Ein Problem in Bezug auf Fake News stellen außerdem die sogenannten Trending Topics dar. Verwandte Themen zu bisher angeschauten Seiten werden von Nutzern in sozialen Netzwerken vorgeschlagen. Und je mehr Menschen einen Post liken, desto eher erscheint er eben halt in diesen Trending Topics. So können sich Falschmeldungen natürlich noch viel besser verbreiten, als das sowieso schon geschieht. Ein Internetnutzer muss aber letztlich unterscheiden können, ob es sich bei dem vorgeschlagenen Thema um eine seriöse Seite handelt, Wir wollen daher generationsübergreifende Angebote für eine deutlich verbesserte Medienkompetenz schaffen. Die Menschen müssen in der Lage sein, Inhalte und Informationen aus dem Internet einschätzen und bewerten zu können und vielleicht so auch selber in die Lage versetzt werden, Falschmeldungen möglicherweise als solche dann auch identifizieren zu können und seriöse Seiten von unseriösen Seiten unterscheiden zu lernen. Dazu gehört eben auch die Identifizierung gezielter Falschmeldungen und diskriminierender Inhalte. Facebook, Google, Twitter und Co. haben unbestreitbar einen großen Nutzen. Dank ihnen ist Kommunikation so einfach wie nie zuvor. Sie sind eben, wie ich eben schon sagte, Leitmedien geworden. Größe bringt aber auch gesellschaftliche Verantwortung mit sich. Dennoch, glaube ich, ist hier große Vorsicht angesagt. Grundrechtssensible Entscheidungen dürfen nicht den sozialen Netzwerken alleine überantwortet werden. Dies wäre eine Aushöhlung von rechtsstaatlichen Verfahren und würde den Rechtsstaat insgesamt infrage stellen, wenn wir sozusagen die Durchsetzung öffentlichen Rechts in dieser Form privatisieren würden. Wie schwierig dieser Balanceakt in der Gesetzgebung ist, hat das gerade in Deutschland beschlossene Netzdurchleitungsgesetz gezeigt. Der Kollege aus dem Ministerium hat schon darauf hingewiesen, dass wir hier heftige Diskussionen in Deutschland auch geführt haben und nicht wenige durchaus ernstzunehmende Rechtswissenschaftler haben dieses Gesetz auch durchaus als verfassungswidrig eingeschätzt und auch gegen EU-Recht verstoßend. Wir werden sehen, wie diese Diskussionen weitergehen. Ich glaube, es bedarf wirksamer Instrumente, mit Gegenrede und Richtigstellung gegen unwahre Behauptungen vorzugehen. Wenn in Diskussionen die Würde von Menschen verletzt und angegriffen wird, muss der Staat aus meiner Sicht handeln. Allianzen und Kampagnen gegen Populismus, Hass und Hetze müssen von uns unterstützt werden. Was wir benötigen, sind aber nicht schärfere Gesetze, sondern eine deutlich verbesserte Zusammenarbeit von Aufsichtsbehörden, von Providern und Strafverfolgungsbehörden sowie eine Stärkung auch vor allen Dingen des Rechtsschutzes der Betroffenen und schnellere Verfahren auch im Bereich des einstweiligen Rechtsschutzes. Ich glaube, hier muss deutlich mehr getan werden, dass Betroffene sich hier auch möglichst schnell und zügig wehren können und dann von Gericht, wenn diese entsprechend personell ausgestattet werden, dann auch entsprechende Hilfe bekommen können. Dies wäre aus meiner Sicht sehr viel grundrechtsschonender und würde zudem die Provider auch keineswegs aus der Verantwortung nehmen. Ich glaube, ich habe schon gesagt, aus Größe wächst auch ein Stück weit gesellschaftliche Verantwortung. Die müssen die Provider auch wahrnehmen. Auch wenn ich grundsätzlich sagen würde, am Ende muss immer letztlich ein rechtsstaatliches Verfahren und ein ordentliches Gericht dann im Zweifelsfall auch eine Entscheidung treffen. Weil wie schwierig das ist, im Zweifelsfall zu entscheiden, was ist noch durch die Meinungsfreiheit gedeckt und was ist im Zweifelsfall übelste Propaganda oder verletzt die Menschenwürde, kann am Ende nur ein Gericht entscheiden. Und ich glaube, man würde da die Provider auch ein Stück weit überfordern, eine solche Entscheidung zu treffen. Es gibt eindeutige Fragen, da ist das ganz einfach und leicht zu beantworten. Es gibt aber auch immer die berühmten Zweifelsfälle. Und hier möchte ich auch sicher gehen, dass eben nicht vorschnell und zu überhastet dann Dinge aus dem Netz gelöscht werden, herausgelöscht werden, die möglicherweise tatsächlich auch von der Meinungsfreiheit gedeckt werden. Und auch hier müssen weiterhin rechtsstaatliche Verfahren gelten. Aufklärung, digitale Bildung und Wissen, also Prävention, sind aus meiner Sicht die weitere, habe ich schon erwähnt, ebenso wichtige Säule im Kampf gegen Fake News, aber auch gegen Hassreden. Das strafrechtliche Instrumentarium ist heute aus meiner Sicht schon ausreichend. Beleidigungen, Verunglimpfungen, Volksverhetzungen, es ist was es in Deutschland gibt, sind bereits heute Straftatbestände. Nur wir müssen auch dafür Sorge tragen, dass diese dann auch entsprechend durchgesetzt werden und hier das Recht auch zu seiner Geltung kommt. Regulierte Selbstregulierung ist, glaube ich, ein weiterer Baustein in diesem ganzen Quartett, was ich von Maßnahmen, die ich genannt habe. Ich glaube, das kann ein probates Mittel sein, auch die Provider, die Plattformbetreiber hier ein Stück weit mit in die Verantwortung zu nehmen. Aber wie gesagt, klar muss immer sein, es darf nicht die Privatisierung von Ordnungsmacht des Staates sozusagen geben, sondern am Ende muss in allen Zweifelsfällen immer sichergestellt sein, dass die Rechte der Menschen, der Nutzer gewahrt werden, auf beiden Seiten gewahrt werden und das rechtsstaatliche Verfahren am Ende immer das letzte Wort haben müssen, wenn es um bestimmte Zweifelsfälle geht. Ich glaube, nur so kann es uns gelingen, den schwierigen Drahtseilakt zwischen Kampf gegen Fake News und Hassreden einerseits und dem Schutz von fundamentalen Grundrechten auf der anderen Seite zu gewährleisten. Vielen Dank.
Thank you, Petra. I know you have to run now, and as we are running also behind the schedule, we have now finally the representative from the European Commission, Paolo Cesarini, head of unit DG Connect European Commission Media Convergence and Social Media Unit, and we'll hear also the European Commission's perspective, and then we come to question and answer, please.
Thank you. Indeed, there would be many things to say about this issue, but I'll try to keep my presentation as short as possible. And I would start by one general consideration. The spread of fake news or misinformation in general has become indeed a global story during and after the electoral campaign in the US and the Brexit. However, this is a phenomenon that has been observed before, is changing quite fast in the recent months, and it should be seen indeed as a proxy for a much wider issues, which somebody has defined as the commercialization and private control of the public spheres by online platforms. And a parallel and corresponding deterioration of the role and the socio-economic foundations of mainstream media. There are four trends that should be kept in mind, just to have always in front of us the bigger picture. The first one is the rapid evolution of news consumption patterns in the EU. It has already been recalled that today, on average, news consumed via social media concerns more than a half of the EU population up to 35 years of age. But this is the main source of information. Third-party platforms, which include social media, search engines, news aggregators, and mobile alerts, are reaching 68% share of the new online distribution. The remaining 32% is held by the online news publisher website accessed directly by the users. The second trend is the concentration of resources and market power in the hands of few social platforms. For instance, Parcely, which a publisher industry monitor, has indicated that in 2016, 73% of the referral traffic to news publisher sites was held by Facebook and Google alone. 42 for Facebook, 31 for Google. The news organizations seem therefore to backtrack from their traditional role as publishers and distributors of their own products. The third is a dramatic shift of advertisement-driven revenue from news publishers to social platforms. Recent studies indicate that 65% of the total advertisement revenues were held in 2015 by the 5 main online platforms. And these include Google, Facebook, Yahoo, Microsoft, and Twitter. And with Facebook and Google alone having reportedly gained 90% of the net digital ad growth, so the growth of the advertisement markets, in 2016. The fourth trend is the increasing influence of social media in shaping the journalism itself. These are two aspects. The first aspect, it is the increased presence of social media into collaborations with news organizations and the launch of new services which are precisely designed to help newsrooms to reach larger audience. Examples are Facebook instant articles, trending topics, for Apple News, for Google's DAMP, for Twitter's Moment. Snapshots has launched also Our Stories and Discover. All these new services involve a certain type of curation activity that blurs a bit the line between the classical separations of distribution and editorial responsibilities. And more importantly, and has been recalled before, the audience reach and the engagement of the viewers is primarily determined by the mechanics of the algorithms that have been put in place by the various actors. Now, each platform has its own algorithms. They're all different. But one thing is common to everybody is the relevancy criteria that drive the functioning of the algorithm are made for extending the time spent by the users on the platform. Because time spent increase the value of the company by generating additional advertisement revenues. Now, there are several studies. You mentioned some. I also read the same thing in other sources, which indicates that when you play with the attention time of viewers, indeed, you discover that in the social media sphere, the attention is more easily captured by strongly opinionated news with sometimes a over leap into misinformation and fake news. And that is actually the problem. And the problem is even more severe because since the news publishers depend more and more on these platforms in order to distribute their products and reach the audience, they are also changing their own editorial mix by swinging from news to views, sometimes giving away the attention that they should pay to the factual correctness of what they publish. So there is a new phenomenon that involves responsibility both from on the side of the platforms and also on the side of the weaker party, which in this case, in this game, are the publishers. Now, that is the first point I want to make. The second point is about fake news and what policy responses can be given. Well, fake news is a difficult concept to define. It encompasses various forms of misrepresentation or distortion of reality in the form of new articles, irrespective of whether they are in the format of text, videos, or audios. Now, a broad distinction can be drawn between fake news that contain elements of illegality and other fake news that fall outside the scope of the existing legislation that condemn certain types of expressions as being against the public interest. So as regards the fake news that embed illegal content, I think the examples have already been quoted, hate speech, incitement to terrorism, incitement to violence, and child abuse, but national laws add to this list by including, for instance, defamation, libel, denial of Holocaust. In all these cases where a piece of information which is fake and contain elements that amount to this form of illegal expression, for this type of information, the safe harbor created by Article 14 of the E-Commerce Directive doesn't apply, meaning that the platforms are held liable if they do not react expeditiously in order to remove the content once they have become aware of its existence on their own services. So, the implementation of this exception has been then operationalized through a mix of hard and soft legislation, through, for instance, in the context of hate speech, through a code of conduct, which has been signed last May 2016 by a number of platforms, and backed by harder legislation, like in this case, the Council framework decision on combating certain form of expression of racism and xenophobia by means of criminal law. This just to give an example, but the same can be said about terrorism. Another action which involves legislation in this specific area of illegal content, it is the AVMSD, so Audiovisual Media Directive, which extends the responsibility to audiovisual platforms that upload audiovisual content that is harmful to minors or contains elements of incitement to hatred, and establish specific measures that should be taken, put in place, appropriate measures by the platforms themselves. Now, the effectiveness of these means still to be fully evaluated. However, the Commissioner has committed to improve their effectiveness, and by the end of the year will make his views known, how to best how to enhance the procedures for take notice and take down procedures, and to better clarify the scope of the liability for platforms. So work there is ongoing. Now, third point, what about fake news that do not constitute illegal content? Well, here the story is very much more complicated. Again, I don't want to enter into definitional issues at this stage. Many things and many examples, useful examples have been made by previous speakers. What I would like simply to stress that irrespective of the definition that needs to be baked at a certain point and somehow needs to be made about fake news that do not constitute illegal content, I think it's generally admitted that the design of a comprehensive response, policy response, must reflect the specific roles of the main actors, meaning social platforms, news medias, and users, define their responsibilities, and by taking into account a number of guiding principles: freedom of expressions, media pluralism, but also the right of citizens to have access to diverse and reliable information. This, by the way, has been implicitly recalled in the resolution of the European Parliament on the 15th of June of this year. In practice, what has been done so far, it is what the Commission has been doing so far, it is to engage in a constructive dialogue with many social media. Certain practical solution, pragmatic solutions have been put in place. They have been recalled. The main ones consist in depriving the fake news websites from the advertisement revenues that they generate through clickbait techniques. The second has been to developing flagging mechanism for fake news using both users and trusted flaggers organizations, combined with fact-checking carried out by independent third parties. Thirdly, experiments are going on with warnings and labels aimed at raising awareness of users about certain stories which are fake. And fourthly, to close accounts of known fakers. There are some good things and some drawbacks. For instance, the follow the money approach for clickbaits seems to work to a certain extent. It's a bit early to say, but seems to work to a certain extent, but only capture a fraction of the phenomenon. Doesn't capture the whole range of misinformation which is going on online. The flagging and fact-checking system is indeed doing good result, but has raised some eyebrows for three reasons. First of all, it is only identifying a limited amount of news. Secondly, intervenes too late when the damage is already done. And thirdly, certain users start to complain about social media exercising private censorship and giving clear preference to more solutions that would create a more diversified and pluralistic ranking of alternative sources of information on social media. I think as regards looking now, and I conclude there, to the future, the Commissioner has, the last week, clearly stated her commitment to carry out a multi-stakeholder engagement process. And it is important to bear in mind that 3 lines of actions are certainly, or 3 lines of discussion need really to be developed in this framework. One is how to improve, building upon what the social platforms have already done so far, what improvements can be actually brought forward. And certainly here there is a number of things to be taken into account. We need to improve the content verification systems, including through more advanced automatic tools. We need to foster effective methods based on network analysis techniques, for instance, that enable an early detection of false narratives, a containment of the virality of these narratives, an identification and an unmasking of the sources and the nodal points, the influencers. And finally, to create practical mechanisms that enable the exposure of alternative sources of information without deciding what is true and what is false, avoiding, therefore, the syndrome of the Minister of Truth, but to increase the pluralism that users can benefit from by being exposed to a different source of information. This implies, and I conclude, something that it is critical, increasing the transparency and the accountability of the algorithms that operates not only in the commercial, they should operate not only in the commercial interest of platforms to raise advertisement revenues, but also in the interest of the users that are who are the holders of the data that enable those algorithms to function.
Thank you very much. Now we have we are running well behind the schedule. I apologize to the next speakers. If there are some questions to the panel, you had a question before, we'll try to wrap it in some 5 minutes and then change the panel.
Thank you. Can you hear me very good? My name is Jan Kust. I'm with External Action Service here in Brussels, and I work in the unit called East Stratcom, Eastern Strategic Communications, which was mentioned by Mrs. Brodnik. Thank you for the mentioning of the work that is being done, carried out by the East Stratcom Task Force in the External Action Service under the auspices of the High Representative Federica Mogherini. Also, thank you very much to the Socialists and Democrats for organizing this event about an extremely important topic. I want to remind those present about the fact that since September 2015, a special unit in the EU's diplomatic service has been working specifically with countering disinformation coming from Russia, from Russian government, disinformation that is systematically pushed and developed by a third state against the interests and the values of the European Union. I also want to say that in that context we have, and I can say that as a part of the unit, we have certainly developed an appreciation of the fact that something that's also being brought up by some of the speakers, namely that it is a little bit difficult maybe to identify a comprehensive answer to the question of fake news, because fake news appear in context. And there's a great difference between a populist reason for spreading fake news or a technical or commercial interest in spreading fake news, and on the one hand, or the lack of due diligence from the side of a media or a journalist on the one hand, and then on the other hand, the case when a state actor is systematically using disinformation, we prefer that term over the term fake news, uses disinformation to undermine the interests and the values of, in this case, the European Union. My question to the speakers is if to what degree they want to open that discussion, of add that component to the question of when we discuss fake news, that the problem when there's a source that uses that is a state actor rather than an actor from civil society. What comment you will have to that? Thank you very much.
Who would like to pick up the answer? I can say something. Yeah, please, Ingrid.
Yes, I also do think that the Russian digital agenda is a huge issue. Just yesterday, I have a new sport on Facebook. When I see advertisement on Facebook, I always click on a button. You can do it as well. You can click on the button. It says, "Why am I seeing this?" And yesterday, I saw advertisement by RT Deutsch, formerly known as Russia Today, and it was targeting Austrians. And as you might know, we are having elections in October, and I was like, I'm not sure how I should feel about that. So the thing is, I've also looked into these Russian media organizations, and the closer you get to Russia, the more fascinating are the stories they produce. The more you are in other countries, it's often not real fake news. It's, as you mentioned, it's often more like a narrative. So what they're really good in is producing narratives which fit the Russian policy. And when you remember Syria, Idlib, the attack there on civilians, this was a time when also you reported that on your blog very well, when you could see how Russian disinformation works. Like in the past, propaganda used to try to, make people sure of an ideology, like saying communism is better than capitalism, or this idea is better than this other idea. The problematic thing about modern propaganda, as it is used by the Russians, is it's not about making an ideology favorable or popular. It's about sowing distrust. And if your citizens think I cannot trust anything, they can trust everybody, like perhaps the Russians, perhaps the right-wing populists in their country. And this method is extremely well working. And I think that you make information about that, it helps me as a journalist often, so I can quote like a public authority on it. But also I think the bottom line is, I think we need to have a European discourse which is really strong, building about the existence of facts. Because what those stories are targeting at is to paint a picture as if facts would not exist anymore. And it's like you have these comments then, to every issue there are two sides. And of course, to every issue there are many opinions, but there are facts. It's not an opinion whether the earth is round or the earth is flat. This is not, you can have your opinion, but you're wrong then. So I think we need to have a public debate where we can agree that of the existence of facts. And when I'm giving speeches or giving workshops about these issues, I must say I'm shocked, because these narratives are very successful. Very often there's one person in the room who is suddenly asking questions like, yeah, but wasn't the attack in Idlib, wasn't that something the rebels did themselves? Or, all these narratives, they're spread. So I think that Europe is perhaps 2 or perhaps even 4 or 5 steps behind at the moment.
Thank you, Ingrid. Please,
Yes.
Professor.
I will just add one thing. We must be aware of the fact that for Russia, and you are totally right, and it's a big problem for Europe, it's just the return of the boomerang, because they consider that we have destabilized USSR by information war. So now for her, they have theorized the idea that InfoWar is a good way to put the boomerang for Europe. And they organize a real industry of fake news. It's perfectly right. And they use, as Ingrid said, the tools of democracy against us, and they find with some people who are complotists, who are distrust of everyone, of everything, of every institution. They use it as I said, useful idiots, or something like this. So, of course, it's a big problem for us.
Thank you. Please, next question.
Good morning. My name is Anna Ferrari. I'm a trainee in communication. And my question is, how do we increase pluralism so that a user can be exposed to more diversified content, as this was one of the solutions proposed?
Indeed, that requires a reflection indeed. We have, first of all, it requires more research to be done in the manner in which disinformation is spread and how it can be tracked. The example of the ISTRA's task force is very important, I think, in this respect. The work done in that respect follows a specific type of misinformation, follows a narrative, and of course with many facets in it, but has an identifiable observation point. I think you need to in order to step up and reach what you have been asking about, we need to have a more narrative-driven approach which involves more actors in this debate, actors which are not only the social media platforms, also the news outlets and the social and the civil society organizations, to really detect the emergence of such harmful narratives very much upfront, and then how to work together with journalistic press to find out what are the counterfactuals that have been elaborated in that respect, and how then to increase the visibility of those counter narratives on social media. Of course, that depends very much on the readiness of social media platforms to cooperate willingly or perhaps through other tools with the appropriate institutions in order to create that level of transparency and accountability in their operating methods. I'm talking about their algorithms that enable an equal ranking of information that pertain to the identified harmful narratives and that come from different sources. This is a little bit the same as to say there is a right to an equal airtime online as well as on other information forms.
Thank you, and I would like now to thank you at that point, our panelists, for the first topic, and ask the other two colleagues on the topic social media platforms and their tackling of fake news to come here to join me on the podium to change and continue. So Mr. Jon Steinberg and Thomas Miro Christensen, if you can join me here, and thank you. And we'll just continue. So as I mentioned, social platform and how they are tackling the fake news. A lot has been said already. So not to waste too much time. I don't know if you need some presentation or some computer. No? So then you don't. So maybe I suggest we start and you can prepare in the meantime. We will not have a break because we have 1 hour and a half to go, and I hope you can still manage with the concentration. Coffee is available to keep us awake, but the topic is also keeping us awake. So I will just pass directly the floor to Managing Director of EU Affairs, Head of Office, Facebook. And I think that will be very interesting to hear. I know that Facebook announced tools to tackle fake news in December 2016 and updated trending in February 2017, but I'm sure you will tell us more. Please go ahead.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Speaker. Members of the European Parliament, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for inviting Facebook to come here today and talk about these very important issues. These are issues that we take very seriously, and as you might be aware, our CEO already last year addressed this issue and said that it was a top priority for Facebook to engage in this issue, and he started to outline a strategy forward on this issue. Technology, of course, has significantly increased the access to information that we have. and people have many new sources for which they can get their information. And I think we must never forget that that's actually a good thing. It is a good thing that there's pluralism, that there are many sources, that there are many voices out there where we can get information from. That doesn't mean that they're all trustworthy or that we should listen to them, but pluralism is a good thing. And technology certainly has helped. At Facebook, we want to make sure that people have a voice to express their opinions and their views, and we certainly don't want to discourage anyone from sharing an opinion that they have within the boundaries of what is considered acceptable speech on our platform. And as many others here, neither do we want to be the arbiters of truth of what is actually right and wrong. And to address some of the issues here, I think we can divide the issue up into sort of two categories. Because one category is about how we de-incentivize some of the bad behavior that might be happening on the internet. And that's important, and I'll come back to that. But I think also that part of the solution here is actually incentivizing the good, or rather making sure that, everyone gets on board into the digital world. And that includes publishing, journalists, and others, and how they can get the most out of the digital world and platforms such as Facebook. I think that when I listen to debates sometimes, it feels a little bit to me like some people think that there's sort of a zero-sum game between publishers and platforms. And I think that is mistaken. We are actually dependent on each other to make the world go round, if I may say it that way. We have some of their content on our site that makes it interesting to come to places like Facebook. But if you want the full story, if you want more, you go to the publisher for that content. That is, I believe, a virtuous circle, and a strong virtuous circle that we want to enforce. And to do that, we have, among other things, invested in what we call the Facebook Journalism Project that we announced earlier this year. And here we really want to collaborate on tools that allow news products to develop into the new digital world. Some of them were already mentioned by the Commission, instant articles, for example, and an approach where we are working with publishers to make their news stories more interesting, more accessible, more designed for the internet, and quickly are available on the internet when you see them on Facebook. We are providing training and tools for people that want to understand how digital journalism works, and we are doing research in this area as well to find ways of approaching digital journalism, and also how to approach some of the challenges that we have talked about here today. So I just want to emphasize again that this, I think, is also part of the solution, that we look at the future of good content, the future of people that want to create interesting content on the internet, and work together to move that forward. Now, when we turn to the issue of what needs to be de-incentivized, which has been discussed quite a lot here today, I think there are many aspects of this issue. Some of the approaches that we have taken have already been pointed to, and I think we have found, at least through the work that we have done, that actually quite a lot of the activities that are going on that relate to false news actually have a commercial component to them. They're not all political. They have a commercial component, and it's simply people that want to make money. We have put in new measures to address this issue, sometimes called follow the money, but to make it harder for people that simply want to do this. This can be going after their accounts. This can be checking certain landing pages for whether they actually are what they say they are. And there can be many other ways of dealing with this issue to prevent people who have a commercial interest in placing information on the internet that's false. These are stories like the Pope is dead, Madonna is dead, things like that make people want to click, and when they click, they might see a lot of advertising. We are also addressing their use of advertising accounts. So there are many ways of dealing with the sort of commercial aspects. Secondly, we have looked at ways of making it easier to report to us if you have concerns about a piece of news that you see on the platform. We have experience with that both in the United States and here in Europe. There's an international sort of fact-checking code of principles in place that organizations that do this checking have to live up to be part of this project. But we have enabled the process that makes it possible for users to report content to us if they have concerns. If these fact-checking organizations decide that, yes, indeed, there's something questionable with this piece of news, we will not remove the content, but we will place a logo on it that says that this is a disputed piece of news. The same thing will happen if you try to share that piece of news. You can, if you want to. You could also maybe want to share it to say, hey, this is false news, this is fake news, I don't believe it. We don't want to prevent you from doing it, but the news would be again associated with a label that would tell you that fact checkers had found the information in this news piece questionable. So this is something we're testing out at the moment and looking at to see how it works. The last part I want to mention, and I think this is absolutely key to moving this forward as well, is the part of this that deals with digital literacy and the importance of making sure that users are trained in literacy, in digital media literacy, in understanding is this a trustworthy source? Is this information I should just share with others? Should I just check before maybe I share? All kinds of things that we all have to learn and maybe become better at in the digital world. And that is as well something we are thinking of and investing in doing both online and offline. So I'll stop there and I look forward to the questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I want to ask our next speaker, Mr. Steinberg, and then we have a round of questions.
Great.
Please be short because we're a little bit delayed.
Yes, I'll do my very best. But first of all, just thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. And I want to take the opportunity today to talk about a couple of issues that Google's been working on to address these concerns around fake news. But I think the first thing to start with for Google is our mission, which is to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. Because it really does shape the way that we think about these problems. And the way that the internet and how people use it continues to change, not only every year, but every day, means that we're constantly evaluating and making changes to search to meet both the evolution of the web and people's expectations. So I'm going to talk very, very briefly about how search works, because I think in order to talk about fake news on Google, you have to understand how search works. Then I'll talk about some of the ways we've been tackling fake news, and then a new tool that we've launched this summer, which we think addresses some of the concerns around media plurality you heard in the last panel. So first, the basics of search. And I'll speed through this, but basically the way search works is that we have web crawlers that go out on the web, and they try to organize the information that's out there on millions of websites, and they bring that information back to Google, and that forms a search index. When web crawlers find a web page, our systems identify signals on that page, from keywords to the site's freshness, and we keep track of all of that within the Google search index, which is made up of over 100 million gigabytes. But when you put in a query, you don't want websites, you want answers. And so our ranking systems, through the use of algorithms, sort through those hundreds of billions of web pages in our search index to give you useful and relevant information in a fraction of a second. And when we think about those algorithms and those systems, our focus is always on the user. Any changes we make to search are always designed to improve the usefulness of the results that you see. And we test those changes because we're constantly working to try to improve search. In 2016 alone, we ran over 150,000 experiments, resulting in just over 1,600 improvements to search. Because our engineers have lots of ideas, thousands each year, of ways to continually improve what we offer. But we don't go on a hunch or an expert opinion. Instead, we rely on extensive consumer testing and have a rigorous evaluation process to analyze metrics and decide whether to implement a proposed change. And we gather data in many ways, and in the interest of time, I'll move ahead a bit more quickly. So I've sped through it in just a couple of minutes, but hopefully you all now have a couple of top-line understanding of how search might work. So how, with understanding that, do we try to tackle this challenge of fake news? Well, it comes in these 4 ways, and I'll go through each of them individually. But the first thing I want to say before I get into the details is that fake news, as we see it on search, is in some ways a familiar challenge to Google. Because like other forms of spam, it's an attempt to game our algorithms, to put low-quality content into your search results, typically to generate revenue through clicks on advertising. And we've been working since the launch of Google 19 years ago to fight this kind of low-quality content, and we continue to do so today. Because when the results in search are not useful and relevant to your query, then we've failed in our mission, and that's a disservice to you, our users. So the first way to fight fake news, we think, is by promoting and helping people find quality news content. And that's why we launched Google News. It may be worth explaining that Google News was born out of the experience of the attacks of September 11th in the United States, when we noticed that people came to search looking for information about the World Trade Center. But because we weren't servicing news content, what we were able to tell them was about the building, who designed it, when was it built, how tall is it. But on that kind of day, that's not what you were looking for when you were searching for the World Trade Center. So that's why we launched Google News, and it's an aggregator of 80,000 sources from 71 countries and 40 languages. And I should say out front, there is no advertising in Google News. We don't generate any advertising revenue from searches on Google News or driving people to news publishers' websites. In order to be considered for inclusion in Google News, outlets must fulfill a number of publicly available criteria, which have been adjusted over time to maintain the quality of these sources. And these include that sites in Google News must not misrepresent, misstate, or conceal information about their owner or their primary purpose. They should primarily offer timely reporting or analysis on recent events, and those news sites should be accountable. We aim to provide consumers with access to a broad range of media outlets and information, and that's why we don't review or reject outlets based on their political or editorial perspective. And critically, the purpose of Google News is to drive consumers directly to news publishers' websites. It's not in our interest to keep consumers on Google News, it's our interest to drive them to publishers, so that they can monetize this traffic and their own content. In addition to this, we've been working with publishers all across Europe for years to try to help them address the challenges of the digital news transition. And because having more high-quality news content on the web is good for Google because it's good for our users. About 3 years ago, we committed funding of 150 million euros across the European Union to journalists and news organizations, and so far have provided 50 million in funding for over 250 projects. But more than just funding projects in newsrooms, we've been working hand in hand with publishers and journalists to develop new products and tools to help them meet their challenges. And one of the tools that we created is accelerated mobile pages, which was mentioned by the representative of the Commission earlier, which helps connect readers with quality content on mobile more quickly. In addition to that, our News Lab team works directly with journalists and entrepreneurs to help with storytelling, distribution, and fact-checking tools. We work with organizations like First Draft News, which is a coalition of over 80 news organizations that are coming together to share best practice and on social media verification. This has led to multiple newsroom training events, conferences, and projects tied closely to the French and German elections to improve fact-checking during those important times. We've also been doing outreach and training in newsrooms in Germany to educate them on fact-check tools ahead of the election later this month. We also, because we believe fact-checking is so important, last year in partnership with Jigsaw, another Alphabet company, we enabled publishers to show a fact-check tag in Google News to help people find articles that fact-check claims made on the web. This allows readers and publishers alike to make informed judgments about the credibility of news they find on Google News and read elsewhere. And starting in April of this year, we expanded the fact-check label from Google News to search, and we've expanded that globally, and it's now available in all countries and in all the languages that we serve. Meaning that now, for the first time, when you conduct a search on Google that returns a result containing fact checks for one or more public claims, you will see information that clearly labels that on the search results page. In addition, we think this fact-checking tool complements how we know users are using search today. A recent study published by academics from Michigan State, Ottawa, and Oxford universities showed that over 60% of users often use search to check facts that they hear elsewhere. So they may read something in social media or hear it from their friends and family or from broadcast news, and they come to search to check whether or not it's true. So the introduction of these fact-check labels should help to even more dispute rumor and dispel myths online. In addition to this, we've also taken a follow-the-money approach to try to cut off the financial incentives to create fake news by cutting off the money that funds it. In November of last year, we launched a new policy for AdSense, our advertising platform for publishers, which bans publishers from placing ads on content which is deliberately misrepresentative, and this policy has since been used to demonetize multiple fake news sites. Last year alone, we took action against bad ads and sites, including removing 1.7 billion ads for policy violations. We removed 100,000 websites from AdSense. We prevented 300 million videos from being monetized with ads, and we took action against hundreds of sites for misrepresentative content. And this was not the first instance of Google choosing not to advertise against a form of content for quality reasons, and I can talk to you about more of those reasons during the discussion. And I think one of the last category of things that we've done, which is to work to improve our products, we've done two important things. First, and these were changes that we launched and announced in April this year. First, we launched new feedback tools, particularly for some search features, such as autocomplete, so when you're typing into search and Google makes a prediction of what you might be searching for, and for featured snippets, is when we show an answer directly in the search result. We've made it easier for people to directly flag content that appears in both those suggestions and in the featured snippets, and these feedback tools include clearly labeled categories, so you can tell us directly if you find sensitive or unhelpful content, and we can use that feedback to improve our algorithms. In addition, we've changed our ranking algorithms to emphasize authoritative sources in your results. And one of the ways we've done that is through changes to our search rater guidelines. I mentioned earlier when I was explaining how search works that we use external search raters to help us understand whether our search results are providing people the answers that they're looking for. There are tens of thousands of these people globally who have been trained to review search result pages. They don't look at individual websites, but they look at the search result pages. But unfortunately, until recently, the quality guidelines that are used to train these people did not do a good job of assessing inaccurate or offensive results. To remedy this, we've updated the guidelines to clarify that high-quality results should be accurate and highly credible, because we don't think we've met our users' expectations of quality when we surface pages which are deliberately created with factually inaccurate content, contain upsetting or offensive results for queries which are not obviously upsetting or offensive, not obviously seeking upsetting or offensive content, and pages which directly contradict well-established scientific or medical consensus or historical fact. These updated guidelines help our engineers and our algorithms identify instances when our ranking systems don't do a good job of helping users find quality content, and we're using the information from those raters to constantly update our algorithms. So the last thing I just want to mention before I finish is just a new feature that we've recently launched, which I think directly addresses some of the concerns I've heard already today about pluralism. So the product that I'm referring to is called the Feed, and this used to be called the Google Search app, and you can download it on iOS or on Android. And the Google Feed is the new Google Search app, which allows you to follow issues that are of interest to you. That could be celebrities, it could be your favorite sports team, your favorite politician, or other issues. In the Search app, you choose issues that are relevant to you, not your social group. And with the updated Feed, Google combines the most important news stories of the day with ones about topics that you've signaled your interest in. But specifically to think about pluralism, because we understand the importance of getting information from a diverse set of sources, especially when it comes to news. So that's why we've been thoughtful about designing a user experience that highlights a variety of perspectives on these topics, showing multiple viewpoints from multiple sources, as well as other related articles. Users will be able to fact check, see other relevant information, and get a more holistic understanding about a story. And with that, I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you very much. We have some time for questions, so please be short in your question, and please also indicate to whom you will address your question. Yes, please. I will take them one by one, and then we collect.
My question is for Facebook. I think there is a real vicious circle when Facebook and fake newsers can earn money even with fake news. So how you can or do you want to break this vicious circle? Like Google, for instance, they have decided not to put some ads on some fake news websites. So we have heard that during the Trump election, some students in Europe have created fake news because they have earned money with that. So how you can fight against this fact?
I actually have a question to both of you, because I watched presentations from Google and Facebook now for years, since we are talking about fake news in mainstream a little bit, and perceived something like an evolution in how you present what you do, and you're doing a lot. To be completely upfront, I'm German. Was there something like a oh shit moment in your companies?
Good question. Other participants who also wants to? Okay, so then who wants to start?
I think only one of those questions was really for me. I would say that a lot of the projects that I've talked about are projects we've been working on over a period of years. So trying to work with publishers is something we've been doing for quite a long time. Trying to support quality journalism in Europe is a project that we've been working on for years. Trying to improve our algorithms is obviously something that we've been working on since Google launched 19 years ago. As I said, we don't consider search to be a solved problem. But of course, as the world's attention focused on fake news, really starting in November of last year, that was an important signal to us to make sure that we're doing everything we possibly can to address those challenges. And as I said, I think at least when it comes to search, this is a problem which is very much like other problems of spam or other bad actors who are intentionally trying to game our algorithms. So we have a wealth of experience. It's not to say that we always get it right or we can be perfect, but I think that our engineers were very motivated to address these challenges, because we really are really focused on serving our users and making sure that when you come to search, you're getting the results that are relevant and important to you.
Thank you.
Thank you. To address the question from the gentleman over here, absolutely, we want that, right? I mean, this is, you know, I think what you're sort of saying is that, well, there's some money to be made, right? Well, that money, you know, if we were to go after that, would destroy the credibility of our platform, right? I mean, it's important for us that we have a platform where people don't, you know, get surprised or get presented with things that are not what they thought it would be. So we have every interest in fighting that, and we absolutely want to, because it's in our interest and because we want to be good citizens, but also because it's in our interest. On the other question, I can almost say the same thing. We've been working on these things for years on things like clickbait, for example, making sure that you know, false accounts or invalid accounts were shut down, things like that. But naturally, over the last year, this work has intensified as this has become an issue that is on the minds of many people.
Thank you very much. A quick, yeah.
I just have one question for Facebook and for Google as well. I mentioned audits. I mentioned that for engineers or for mathematicians, it would be possible to test the algorithm for certain biases. And it's very hard to make those tests on the outside. So more and more scientists are suggesting that, for example, Facebook should open up their algorithms for the newsfeed especially, to test for such biases, to test, for example, effects like how emotions are being favored, what type of content is being favored. Will Facebook do that? Will Facebook or Google start doing that, allowing independent audits by other engineers or scientists?
Okay, so thank you.
Thank you for that question. It's an important issue, and I think that the challenge is that that we want to do research the right way, and we actually have a research program at Facebook, and there's a page on the web, maybe you're already familiar with it, where you can see what kind of research we allow people to do. And the reason for this is that, you know, there's a lot of ethics evolved around this issue. For example, in the Facebook journalism project that I shortly mentioned in my introduction, we are talking about research. We are talking about how to do these sort of things. But we have to do it in a smart way where we don't compromise things like ethics, data protection, all kinds of other issues. And that's why we are being careful in the way we're doing these things. But I think it's a discussion we should have, and I think we should find ways of addressing these issues.
I think the only thing I would add is that there is an organization in Germany who is currently running an experiment to try to see whether or not there's bias in our algorithms around the German election, and the findings they've already published demonstrate that they haven't found such bias. So I think that there are ways of trying to understand that kind of issue, and I'm pleased to see that so far those that are using those ways are showing that you know, that we are doing what we say we do.
So, very short, because we are behind in our schedule.
Thank you. Very short. Just because we're working recently on the code of ethics for the new technologies, artificial intelligence. I'm chair of STOA, the Scientific and Technology Committee. I would like to ask you, if tomorrow you would have a different job, like in politics, what would be your suggestions from what you already know to add to this code? So would you have like 2, 3 proposals to us to make sure that we guarantee the safety of privacy, and we make sure that we don't use algorithms for misinformation, but at the same time we will not, for example, allow to ban the content to protect citizens? Do you have any kind of codes that we can actually protect citizens from algorithms and at the same time not touch content, and to let the freedom of speech be a freedom of speech?
I'm afraid I'm not familiar with the code that you've mentioned.
Code of ethics is some rules that the scientists or the companies should follow, and restrict themselves from doing something that could harm citizens, for example. So we should stop working on something that could harm citizens, like an algorithm that could change itself, and then the results might be against citizens. For example, if you have on your database some people searching about a disease, maybe this database could be bought by by an insurance company, and then some people might be excluded from their insurance. So the Code of Ethics says that this is something that we should not allow ever to happen in our society.
So I don't want to say I'm happy to look at it in more detail, but I think that the kinds of issues that you just mentioned are issues that were in vigorous agreement about, and that the privacy policies and the other policies that we have within our products, the way that we handle personally identified information, the fact that we don't sell user data to third parties, etc., hopefully perhaps offer ideas that we can be more specific about to support that code, because I think that many of the issues that you've just discussed, we share common cause.
Very quickly, I agree with what was said here. I think there are some of these issues for certain that are addressed by data protection regulation, by other things. We don't sell people's data either. That's not our business model. But naturally, there are discussions that we need to have, and I think it's going to be an interesting discussion to have about the impact of algorithms on different things, and that's an important topic we need to discuss in common.
Okay, so thank you for the moment. I think we should take this opportunity to invite you for further discussions. We are interested as parliamentarians to keep in touch, and we'll try to find a format where we can continue this discussion with social media platforms on these really relevant issues. So thank you very much, and I'm asking the other colleagues then to join me on the podium. So thank you very much. And,
thank you so much.
Can Guy Berger and Ricardo Gutierrez also join me here? Because we want to combine these two sessions into one, so that gives us more time then for the final discussion. Yeah. So. Okay, so you should start first. So we have two parts now. The first part is on the battle against fake news and the rise of the radical right, and the second one, which is related, fake news and the future of professional and ethical journalism. We have both parts in one session, and I would ask Joe Mulhall from Hope Not Hate from the United Kingdom to start with his presentation, and please try to be less than 10 minutes. Yeah?
Yeah, I'll keep it as brief as possible. I'll cut out some bits. Thank you for having me. I'm coming from an organisation called Hope Not Hate, which is based in the UK. We're an anti-racism organization that kind of combines research about the international far right, but also engages in political campaigning, community organizing, and education. I'm going to talk very briefly a little bit about where does this fake news come from in terms of the far right, because I think we haven't talked about that a huge amount. How big and how important is the issue of fake news coming from the far right? And then, most importantly, I guess a few discussions about what we can do about it, which I guess is why we're here, really. It's been covered relatively thoroughly this morning already, so I won't go over it again. But of course, there are different types of fake news, as has been said. There are explicitly manufactured, completely false stories. And then there are also kind of half-truths, semi-truths, etc., and we'll go through those. So where does far-right fake news come from? It doesn't just appear on our Facebooks and our Twitters. It's created by people, it's created by political activists in terms of the far right, and we have to know where it comes from. There's a number of places. One is a number of quite large message boards, most of which most people will not have heard of, things like 4chan, 8chan, certain aspects of websites called Reddit. Some of you may have heard of these things, some of you may not. These are kind of message boards and picture boards that are often the birthing pool of these conspiracies that they talk about. Some pictures were shown of these this morning. A good example of this, which again has been mentioned, was Pizzagate in America, a conspiracy that there was a child grooming or child sex ring being run out of a pizzeria in America and being supported by Hillary Clinton. On the face of it, it sounds crazy. But it was born in these message boards, it was spread, it was then picked up by relatively mainstream media outlets, and it ended with a gentleman going in and firing an automatic rifle in the pizza restaurant. So this is the importance of some of these small little online worlds that exist. There's also, as has been again discussed, these supposedly or so-called alternative right-wing media outlets, things like Breitbart and InfoWars. Again, these are ostensibly portray themselves as real news websites, but actually range from, in the case of things like InfoWars, are conspiracy-laden and created news, and in terms of Breitbart are much more kind of nuanced, but still have elements of fake news within them. I'll go through a few examples of how this works. And then there are, of course, these kind of explicitly fake news websites run from all over the world, pumping out fake news in the interest of profit. One thing that's really interesting and needs to be talked about is the journey of these stories from these kind of obscure far-right areas of the internet into the mainstream. There is a journey that happens here. What we see is we see often these ideas are created on message boards by far-right activists, discussed and talked about how they would push this agenda. They then creep their way on when they kind of reach a mass onto social media platforms. They're then picked up by alternative news sites, things like Breitbart, which will publish on them. And then sometimes even those stories are picked up again by far more mainstream things like Fox News in America or similar sites. So how big is this problem? So I'll kind of give you a few very small and brief case studies on this. I mean, I mentioned 4chan. This is a website that has millions and millions of users. It has 109 million monthly users. Now, many of those are from across the political spectrum or none at all, and about 10% of that come from a specific aspect of that website called politically incorrect, which is engaging in a lot of this far-right activity. So the numbers there are relatively large. Again, if we're looking at where this traffic comes from, almost in all of these sites, it's the UK and Germany. Unsurprisingly, they're in the top 5. Of course, that's based on populations, but Europe is always well served in them. I'm going to mention a good example of a person that does it. Again, some of these people that are creating these things have huge followings, and the vast majority of people have never heard of them. There's a gentleman called Paul Joseph Watson, who some of you may have heard of, most of you won't. He creates fake news and conspiracy videos, etc., and he has over 1 million subscribers on YouTube. He has over 224 million views on YouTube. He has hundreds of thousands of followers on Twitter, on Facebook, etc. And he was one of the key players behind the Hillary is dying conspiracy theory. He created some videos around her being ill, which were later kind of these narratives were picked up by Fox News. What's really interesting about this character is, first of all, most people have never heard of him, and yet he's got this pull and this interest and these huge numbers of people looking at his content. But also it's a good articulation of how international this problem is. He's based in South London. He's creating content which is being shared around the internet across Europe, around the world, and it's having influence on elections in America. And there's lots of examples like this. This is a genuinely transnational phenomenon that we're kind of trying to deal with here. If we look at the more moderate end of this issue, which has been talked about earlier, these websites that don't necessarily manufacture news, but they put a slant on it, or they have kind of aspects of fake news in them. Breitbart's the great example. 83.32 million visitors a month. Huge figures. Again, the UK is second. Germany, I think, is fourth in that. Europe, again, is generally well serviced by this. And actually, I just wanted to use them as a little case study. I want to be quick, because I know we haven't got time. But about how they engage in what I would class as fake news. And they use a tactic, and this is a tactic that is used by many of these right-wing news agencies and fake news purveyors. Essentially, what they do is they have a headline that confirms the reader's beliefs or prejudices, and it's quite often very, very separate to the story. It will be some extraordinary claim likely to get clicks, etc. But then what you find is when you actually read the article, they instantaneously row back on the claim. In fact, sometimes they contradict the claim completely. A good example is a recent article, 7 found guilty of robbing German churches to finance jihad, was the headline. When you then read one of the first lines of the article was, judges said it was unclear whether the funds they generated were actually used to support armed jihad. Now, of course, the reason they do this is because most people share these articles without reading them. Research on this shows around 59% of shared articles on social media do not get read by the people that share them. So what we end up having is we have these headlines that run through the internet, that run across social media, and then the caveats and the nuances that are then placed in the stories, or sometimes even contradicting the headlines, are never actually read by the people. So I think that's an important example of how some of these websites use. So I'll give a very brief example of the Hillary Clinton one, and then I'll come on to a French one. In terms of this, there was a long video created by Paul Joseph Watson that now has over 6 million views, claiming that Hillary Clinton was ill or perhaps dying, and thus unfit to be president. He'd picked up these narratives from much smaller people creating fake news that had far less reach, so he amplified it. It then got picked up by a newspaper, started talking about it. It then got picked up by Fox News and discussed on there. So it's a good example of how what we see is at each stage of this, it is, first of all, the message is honed, it's clarified sometimes, and then each time it is amplified as it works its way to the mainstream. And then quite often the kind of far-right background of these stories created on these kind of online far-right networks disappears. It's almost washed, as was discussed this morning. Another example of this, I'll kind of just to put some figures on it, in the French elections, the Macron leaks, which again was mentioned, there's been some really interesting research on this. There's a gentleman called Jack Posobiec who works for, or he did work for, a Canadian far-right website called Rebel Media. He was central to spreading this story. Now, he found out about the Macron leaks story from 4chan, this website I was telling you about. Then there was these discussions about loading the papers with fake stories, etc., with fake leaks, etc., to try and muddy the waters. They then used automated bots to project this information and project these stories through social medias. And these things had an impact. Of course, they didn't win in that case. But I think what's really important here is Le Pen made a video after the first round of the election. I just want to quote from the very beginning of it, where she says, "My dear friends, I want to make this video to thank you, the internet militants who were mobilized from the beginning of this campaign on social media 24/7. You actively participated in the campaign with creativity, energy, and humor. You intelligently resisted the propaganda and the lies spread by the system's media. You are among the craftsmen of this first victory." The fact that we'd have a leader like Le Pen recognizing the influence of some of these kind of far-right fake news purveyors is important. And again, how transnational, if you look under the video, one of the first comments says, "I'm just an Australian shitposter," which is kind of an online term for people who attempt to derail online conversations by posting content. "I'm just an Australian shitposter who works in a supermarket and posts nationalist memes in my spare time. But I've been thanked by the future president of France in a YouTube video for my contribution to her cause. Truly, this is the best timeline. Vive Le Pen." So, again, just showing how international it is. So I'm going to conclude and then talk about very briefly about some things we might be able to do that have been discussed and some that haven't. I mean, firstly, is this important? Yes, I think this is actually fundamentally important. I think this is kind of fake news, and the use of fake news by the far right poses a genuine threat to progressive liberal democratic politics. It's deeply, deeply worrying, some of the impact these people are having. Together, these groups, not just, you've got groups like the so-called alt-right, you've got the far right, you've got the international anti-Muslim movements, you've got the traditional far right, together often using kind of cutting-edge technology, manipulative technology, they pose a fundamental threat to the liberal, democratic, progressive order. I genuinely believe that, and I think we need to take it seriously. So what can we do about it? Well, as I say, firstly, this is an international phenomenon and it will demand an international response of some form. I think working along national borders here won't be enough. We have people in one country affecting politics in another, using people in a third. So very briefly, education is central to this. We have to teach people how to spot fake news, how to recognize it, what are the tools that people are using. We have to hold our mainstream newspapers and mainstream media outlets to account. They have an obligation here to not amplify and repeat stories that are not true or that are fake news. Hope Not Hate do a lot of work around challenging mainstream newspapers when they either print things that are incorrect or whether they are covering stories in a way that is different from the truth. So we have an obligation to do that. As has been discussed, we have to hold the platforms to account. Facebook and Google, it's good to see them here, but we have to continue to work to make sure those things happen. But more generally, I guess, to finish, I say, is we have to fight back on this. We have to do more, and we have to fight back. We have to take these people on. Fake news is created by people. It is pushed by organizations with a political agenda, and it demands that we then fight back. And I don't just mean we have to fight back on their turf in some senses. We cannot fight where we want to. This is happening in certain spaces, and we have to get back and we have to speak a language that will work. Fact-checking has its place, of course it does, but a lot of this is based on fear, it's based on anger, it's based on emotion, and we have to speak those same languages. And that involves us being in those spaces and listening to those concerns and fighting back. So most importantly, I guess we need to fight the hatred and fear that is pushed by these people and pushed using far-right fake news with more inspirational, more positive and more hopeful futures. I think that's the only way we're really going to win this, and that's by listening to people and attempting to, we can go through all the fact-checking we want, we can deal with all the platforms we want, but actually this is going to be a battle about us producing messages and stories and narratives that are more positive and more progressive. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker is Gerald Hensel. There was some problem with the slides, but I think it's solved.
Sorry? So do we have a presentation? Or yeah, that's great.
Good.
What's your presentation? What's the name of it?
Oh, I don't know.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so problem is nearly solved. Yeah.
Ich glaube, guten Tag erstmal, ich heiße Gerald Hensel, ich komme von einem Verein namens Fearless Democracy. Ich habe mich entschieden, aus Zeitgründen das in Deutsch zu machen, weil wir, glaube ich, jetzt noch 8 Minuten haben, nachdem ich 2 Minuten die Präsentation eingerichtet habe. Ich würde gerne heute über das Thema Fake News aus einer etwas anderen Richtung berichten, die vielleicht jetzt nicht klassisch politisch im engeren Sinne ist und die jetzt auch nicht im engeren Sinne die hohe Politik, die Macrons und die Merkels dieser Welt im engeren Sinne umfasst, sondern eine andere Komponente, die ich selbst erlebt habe und die mit einigen Sprechern, die schon gesprochen haben, zu tun hat. Vor allen Dingen den großen Netzwerken und ihrem Kampf gegen Hate Speech, aber auch dem Vertreter des Justizministeriums, der ja das NetzDG mit umgesetzt hat, von dem ich persönlich als einer der ersten ein Stück weit mit profitiere gerade. Mein Verein Fearless Democracy ist ein Verein, der von Kommunikationsexperten gebildet wurde. Wir sind eigentlich PR-Leute. Wir haben viele von uns einen Werbehintergrund, so auch ich. Wir sind Digitalexperten. Wir haben uns im letzten Jahr formiert nach einer Aktion, die ich privat gestartet habe, die vielleicht einige Deutsche schon mal gehört haben, die im Raum hier sind. Die hieß Kein Geld für Rechts. Und Kein Geld für Rechts war ein ganz privates Aha-Erlebnis. Ich bin seit 20 Jahren in der Werbung in verschiedenen Funktionen. Ich habe zuletzt in einer großen Berliner Werbeagentur als Leiter der strategischen Planung im Digitalbereich gearbeitet, kenne mich ein bisschen mit dem Internet aus und bin über eine Sache gestolpert, die ich gleich vorstellen werde. Das sind die Google Trends. Wenn man meinen Namen Gerald Hensel googelt, da passiert 5 Jahre erstmal gar nichts, aber es gibt so einen Moment in meinem Leben, das sind die berühmten 15 Minutes of Fame, die plötzlich einen sehr großen Ausschlag hatten, und der Auslöser war das hier. Ich habe im letzten Jahr mich sehr viel um die amerikanische Alt-Right, um die neuen Phänomene, die gerade damals mit alternativen Medien in den USA zu bestaunen waren, beschäftigt. Und es gibt in den USA eine Social-Media-Initiative, die heißt Sleeping Giants, die ist etwa zeitgleich mit meiner Aktion gestartet, nur dass ich es unter Klarnamen gemacht habe und nicht anonym. Was passiert war Folgendes: Wir sehen uns eine Meldung an wie Birth Control makes women unattractive and crazy oder 1000 men mob attacked police, set German oldest church light on fire, alles Fake News. Und was wir sehen, sind Banner daneben. Banner von Amazon, Banner von großen Marken, die wir hier finden. Telekom war dabei, BMW war dabei, Mercedes war dabei. Anders ausgedrückt, große Unternehmen finanzieren dies. Ja. Ich habe dann vermessen, wie ich war, als Privatmensch diesen Tweet rausgeschickt und 2 Blogartikel geschrieben, der hieß Screenshotte einen Banner auf breitbart.com, tweete dies an die werbende Marke, tagge es mit dem Hashtag kein Geld für rechts. Mir wurde daraus so ein bisschen gedreht, dass ich einen Boykott verursacht hätte. Was ich gemacht habe, war einfach zu sagen, in einer Welt, in der Marken noch nicht mal mehr wissen, wo sie werben, weil dahinter ein System ist, was gerade durch Google gestützt wird vor allen Dingen und Facebook ebenfalls. Das heißt Programmatic Advertising, das sorgt dafür, dass Marken keine Ahnung mehr haben, außer sie listen sich speziell aus, wo sie werben, wo ihre Banner rauskommen. Da sollten vielleicht die einen oder anderen Unternehmen noch mal ein bisschen besser hinschauen, speziell wenn sie von der Europäischen Union profitieren. Das Resultat in meinem Fall waren 50 Morddrohungen etwa, knapp 5000 Hassmessages. Von meinem Arbeitgeber wurden insgesamt 16 Kunden boykottiert. Fast jeder Vorstand meines damaligen Arbeitgebers in Berlin hat Drohungen bekommen, bis hin zu Morddrohungen. Und wir haben insgesamt 472 PowerPoint-Seiten mit Drohungen, Hass, jeweils mit 6 bis 8 Tweets von Phantomkonten belegt, zum Staatsschutz geschafft. Das klingt beachtlich, wenn ich dann über den Output dieser ganz beachtlichen Operation gegen meine eigene Person, also das Ziel war, mich aus meinem Job zu kriegen, das war die Idee, das hat 2 Wochen lang gedauert und war wirklich eine der eher anstrengenden Phasen meines Lebens. Ich würde gerne eine Frage in den Raum stellen, aber dazu haben wir leider nicht die Zeit. Wenn wir sagen 5000 Hassmessages und 50 Todesnachrichten, was schätzt jemand im Raum, wie viele verurteilbare Cases daraus gekommen sind? Wie viele Fälle habe ich daraus deduzieren können, juristisch gewonnen? Es war bisher einer. Es war einer. Es gibt seit letzter Woche einen Brief von der Staatsanwaltschaft, die mir gesagt hat, es gibt aus 5000 Hassbotschaften schon 20 Fälle, die sie herausfinden konnten. Um 19 wollen sie sich leider nicht weiter kümmern. Das muss ich zivilrechtlich machen. Das ist ein großes Problem. Ich bin zwar dem NetzDG auch nicht sonderlich positiv gegenüber gestimmt in manchen Punkten, aber die Auskunftspflichten, die da in Zukunft kommen, sind wichtig und sind richtig, weil bisher einfach für Opfer von Hass und Gewalt einfach nichts passiert und Hass, wie wir heute schon gehört haben, ein zentraler Treiber ist. Ein vorletzter Punkt, und ich gucke die ganze Zeit wirklich auf die Uhr, ich beeile mich wirklich. Wer über Hass spricht, ist ganz wichtig, nochmal sich in den Kopf zu bringen, wie Hass eigentlich oder welches Ziel Hass verfolgt. Und ja, wir haben heute ganz viel über die Macrons dieser Welt und über Hillary Clinton und Donald Trump und all diese Leute gesprochen, aber es gibt eine wesentlich größere und momentan noch sehr unsichtbare Seite von öffentlichem Hass. Die hat etwas mit Leuten, ehrlich gesagt, wie mir und vielen anderen zu tun. Vielleicht ist es auch ein Pfarrer, vielleicht ist es ein kleiner Bürgermeister, vielleicht ist es auch ein Akademiker, ein Journalist. Der hat etwas mit Populisten zu tun, die nämlich eben nicht nur die korrupten Eliten da oben, die Politiker, die Mitglieder des Europäischen Parlaments, die Martin Schulzes dieser Welt angreifen, sondern eben die Menschen dazwischen, das Mittelmanagement einer Gesellschaft, der Journalist, der Bürger, der Pfarrer, der sich für ein Flüchtlingsheim einsetzt. Und genau dieses Element, das Mittelmanagement einer Gesellschaft, ist die weiche Schicht, die viel einfacher anzugreifen ist als unseren Justizminister oder als unsere Bundeskanzlerin in Deutschland, weil diese Leute, so ebenso wie ich, auch wenn ich gut verdrahtet war in meinem Shitstorm, mich einfach wesentlich weniger gegen den Angriff von insgesamt 1,4 Millionen Tweets in 2 Wochen, 1,4 Millionen Tweets, wehren kann. Und das war einer der Gründe, weshalb wir Fearless Democracy gegründet haben. Fearless Democracy hat ein Element der Aufklärung. Wir haben Datenjournalisten mit an Bord, die versuchen, Journalisten dort vielleicht ein Stück weit inhaltlich weiterzuhelfen, wo sie gewisse Shitstorms, Fake News gegen Einzelne nicht verstehen können oder nicht weiter transportieren können. Das haben wir kürzlich zum Beispiel bei einem ganz bekannten Fall in Deutschland gemacht mit Margot Käßmann, der bekannten Theologin, die einem großen Shitstorm ausgesetzt war. Aber ein letztes kurzes Projekt, das würde ich gerne hier noch mal ganz kurz anmoderieren und vorstellen. Vielleicht gibt es ja den einen oder anderen Interessenten dafür. Ist ein Projekt, was wir jetzt gerade gestartet haben. Das heißt Hate Aid. Hate Aid hat die Planung für, wie wir auf Deutsch sagen, Otto Normalverbraucher, für das Mittelmanagement einer Gesellschaft die erste Plattform zu sein, die eben in einem Shitstorm, bei einem politischen Angriff, der mittlerweile tagtäglich über verschiedene Leute hereinprasselt, hilft. Und Hate Aid soll vor allen Dingen nicht nur über die Verursacher von Hate Speech und von Fake News sprechen, sondern mal über die Opfer. Das passiert nämlich praktisch nie, weil es kaum jemand erlebt hat. Ein Element daraus ist, Hass zu tracken mit Datenjournalismus. Es hilft nämlich durchaus schon mal, wie in meinem Fall oder in vielen anderen Fällen, mal die Frage zu stellen, wie distribuieren sich Netzwerke Hass, wie werden Lügen weitergetragen. Das ist im Zweifelsfall später auch vor Gericht sehr hilfreich. Wir sind zurzeit gerade dabei, eine mobile App zu machen, die Menschen, wie gesagt, dem kleinen, normalen Politiker mal als Beispiel helfen sollen in einer Situation, in der er wahrscheinlich gerade von 150 Populisten-Accounts überrannt wird, die viel größer sind als er, einfach stehen zu bleiben und auch festzustellen, wie er nicht seinen Freundeskreis kompromittiert und wie er da weiterkommen kann. Und ein drittes elementares Element aus Hate Aid ist zurzeit ein Pilotprojekt, was wir in Deutschland durchführen, was jetzt im Falle von NetzDG in meinem Fall auch zu ersten Erfolgen geführt hat. Das ist nämlich ein automatisiertes System zu schaffen, wo zivilrechtliche Lösungen für Hate Speech möglich sind. Fakt ist immer noch, und das muss man einfach mal so sagen, wir können nicht jeden Fall von Hate Speech, der auf Facebook oder auf Twitter stattfindet, jetzt von einem Gericht aburteilen. Das klingt immer so, wie als wenn Facebook das einfach nur jetzt an einen Richter weitergeben muss oder an einen Staatsanwalt und dann machen wir das so. Das hat ja was mit purer und schierer Masse zu tun. Wie gesagt, in meinem Fall redeten wir über 1,4 Millionen Tweets und mindestens 5.000 konkrete Bedrohungen, die ich dokumentieren konnte. Daraus wurden bisher ein juristisch verwertbarer Fall, der diesem Projekt hier 1.400 € gebracht hat. Das ist das Resultat von 1,4 Millionen Einheiten Hate Speech. Und deshalb, also ein Appell ist natürlich, wir suchen natürlich, wer auch immer hier im Raum ist, Kooperationspartner, möglicherweise auch Funding-Spezialisten. Ich bin hier für Ansprechpartner mit meiner E-Mail-Adresse natürlich immer gerne zu haben. Wo wir aber drum werben, ist Hate Speech, Fake News, Kampagnen richten sich nicht nur gegen Hillary Clinton, richten sich nicht nur gegen Merkel, nicht nur gegen Macron, die richten sich zunehmend gegen kleine Bürgermeister, Pfarrer und auch Werbeleute wie mich. Und für diese Leute ist derzeit momentan einfach kein Raum da, um mit diesen Problemen fertig zu werden. Und ich habe die 10 Minuten geschafft. Dankeschön.
So, thank you very much and sorry for being tough on the time. Yeah, but, we have 2 more speakers and it's quite interesting that in the first round we had people who are organizing themselves around the issue and now we are coming to the, let's say, old actors, yeah, the journalists, they always had been in this field, and I'm very happy that Ricardo Guterres is here. He's the Secretary General of the International Federation of Journalists. And then we have, as the last speaker, Guy Berger from the UNESCO. Some people ask why UNESCO, but UNESCO is, you also will see a very important actor in this field, or could be.
Thank you. Je vais m'exprimer en français. Je parle donc au nom de la Fédération européenne des journalistes, qui est la principale organisation de journalistes en Europe, et je vais vous parler de la panique des fake news. J'estime effectivement qu'il y a une espèce d'emballement, d'hystérie autour de cette question. Alors, la désinformation pour les journalistes, c'est une vieille affaire. Les médias de masse, dans les années 20, vous avez un exemple ici, faisaient déjà de la propagande, de la désinformation. Ici, c'est un article d'un écrivain très célèbre, Georges Simenon, qui, dans sa jeunesse, a écrit une série d'articles sur le péril, ce qu'on appelait à l'époque le péril juif, donc une série d'articles qui véhiculaient les pires clichés de l'antisémitisme dans un quotidien catholique belge de grande diffusion. Voilà, un média de masse de l'époque. Les fake news, c'est pas nouveau. Alors, je ne veux pas minimiser le danger du phénomène. Hein. L'écrivain et journaliste Stefan Zweig a bien montré les dangers de la propagande, et notamment son rôle, le rôle de cette propagande dans l'essor du fascisme dans l'Europe de l'avant-guerre. La philosophe et journaliste, elle aussi, allemande, Hannah Arendt, a bien résumé ce risque de la désinformation. Si tout le monde se met à mentir, la conséquence n'est pas que vous allez croire aux mensonges, mais bien que plus personne ne croira plus personne. Et c'est cette défiance généralisée, cette crise de confiance qui conduit elle aussi, qui peut conduire elle aussi au totalitarisme. Non, pas question dans mon esprit de minimiser le problème. Alors, les États souhaitent réagir. Comment réagissent-ils? On l'a entendu tout à l'heure, le Parlement allemand a approuvé le 7 juillet la loi sur la régulation des réseaux sociaux. Il est possible donc maintenant en Allemagne d'infliger des amendes, enfin il sera bientôt possible, hein, cette loi n'est pas encore d'application, d'infliger des amendes aux réseaux qui diffusent des contenus qui violent, comme on l'a dit, le code pénal. Hein. Donc, un des problèmes que nous trouvons à cette loi, c'est que en fait tout ça se fait sans contrôle judiciaire. Et qu'il y a un risque évident de générer une certaine autocensure de la part des réseaux sociaux. Alors pour information, la Russie est très intéressée par cette loi et elle est tout à fait disposée à l'implémenter elle aussi dans sa législation. Alors nous sommes, nous, à la Fédération européenne des journalistes, opposés nous avons critiqué cette loi, nous ne sommes pas les seuls. Le comité pour la protection des journalistes américain a lui aussi dénoncé la loi allemande, évoquant même la censure. Article 19, l'Organisation de défense de la liberté d'expression britannique, a développé une très longue argumentation juridique critiquant cette loi, donc critiquant notamment le pouvoir donné au réseau de décider ce qui allait être publié ou pas, en fonction des risques législatifs. Hein. Donc on leur accorde quelque part un droit de censure disproportionné. Donc le problème, c'est l'attitude des réseaux sociaux qui sera dictée par leurs intérêts économiques et pas par l'intérêt public. Alors, la Fédération européenne des journalistes, la Fédération internationale des journalistes, Article 19, le CPJ, IPI, ont déposé une alerte concernant cette législation sur la plateforme du Conseil de l'Europe, la plateforme du Conseil de l'Europe pour la protection du journalisme. Le gouvernement allemand a répondu à notre alerte. À notre sens, cette réponse n'est pas satisfaisante. Alors, ce qui nous inquiète, c'est la tendance des États à vouloir régler le problème des fake news par une régulation légale spécifique basée sur des amendes, basée sur une répression. Alors, fin mai, l'Union européenne a laissé filtrer ses intentions de réguler juridiquement les discours de haine. Au début, on parlait des discours de haine au mois de mai. Et puis, voici une semaine, donc, on l'a dit en introduction, je pense que c'est Tania Fayon qui l'a rappelé, la commissaire Maria Gabriel a annoncé la création d'un groupe d'experts sur les fake news et le lancement d'une consultation publique, le tout à la demande expresse d'ailleurs du président Juncker, et de nouveau sans concertation préalable avec notamment la profession, puisque l'organisation représentative des journalistes, en tout cas, n'a pas du tout été consultée sur ces initiatives. Alors, Pour nous, la régulation, ce genre de régulation en tout cas, est une solution à la fois facile politiquement, mais je pense inefficace. Dans la même veine ou dans le même esprit qu'Article 19, Martin Moore du King's College nous prévient que responsabiliser de cette forme, de cette façon, les plateformes, c'est aussi leur donner le pouvoir de trier l'information. Le professeur Jonathan Albright partage lui aussi cette conviction. Hein. Pour lui, c'est aussi inquiétant. Hein. Ce qui est inquiétant, ce ne sont pas les fake news en tant que tels, c'est le risque finalement induit de marginalisation des voix dissidentes, des voix minoritaires, sous l'effet donc de l'autocensure que s'appliqueraient les plateformes. Curieusement, personne du côté politique, alors mon prédécesseur l'a fait, mais du côté politique, personne ne propose de réguler le financement des fake news. Hein. Storyzai, qui est un moteur de recherche français de citations d'actualité, a publié récemment le relevé des corporations, des entreprises qui financent les sites web producteurs de fake news, et plus de 600 marques mondiales financent ces usines à fake news. On y trouve des compagnies technologiques, c'est intéressant, les compagnies technologiques investissent donc dans la production de fake news, des banques, des compagnies aériennes, des universités. Pour nous, c'est une stratégie globale qui doit être mise en œuvre pour lutter contre les fake news. Ça passe d'abord, à nos yeux, par l'éducation critique aux médias. Il faut toucher les enfants, mais aussi leurs parents, comme le fait très bien d'ailleurs ici, vous en avez un exemple, l'ONG ChildNet International. Alors je sais que l'Union européenne a lancé des initiatives en matière de media literacy, d'éducation aux médias, et nous nous en réjouissons. Surmonter la crise de crédibilité des médias est aussi un enjeu. Vous voyez ici un graphique qui donne l'état de la crédibilité des médias en France. Et vous voyez que depuis 2015, c'est là que les courbes commencent à descendre. Cette crédibilité est en baisse, même pour la radio, hein, qui est traditionnellement le média le plus crédible. Hein. Alors, le média le moins crédible, c'est Internet, hein, c'est la courbe du bas, mais tous diminuent, tous perdent de la crédibilité. Alors, que peut-on faire face à ça ? D'abord, promouvoir le journalisme de qualité. À mon sens, c'est le meilleur antidote face aux fake news. Hein, comme l'exprime si bien cet article de la Columbia Journalism Review, il est plus utile et plus urgent de combattre le mauvais journalisme que de combattre les fake news. Alors, des entreprises de presse réagissent en créant par exemple des plateformes de fact-checking, voire en octroyant des labels de qualité, ce que fait le journal Le Monde avec Décodex. Personnellement, ce n'est pas une méthode que j'approuve. De quel droit, finalement, Le Monde s'estime détenteur de la vérité, journalistique en tout cas. On sait aussi que le fact-checking n'est pas une solution miracle. On l'a vu en Russie, cette nouvelle pratique journalistique peut être détournée de son sens. En fait, les journalistes sont parfois manipulés. Hein, plutôt que de couvrir l'actualité, en fait, ils passent leur temps à démonter et à démentir les fake news qu'on leur jette, un peu comme si on jetait des os à ronger aux chiens de garde de la démocratie. Le journalisme de qualité, c'est aussi la promotion de la déontologie professionnelle. Nous sommes partisans à la Fédération européenne des journalistes de la co-régulation, c'est-à-dire la régulation journalistique par les journalistes et par la société civile, ensemble, parce que l'information n'appartient pas aux journalistes, elle n'appartient pas aux médias, elle appartient aux citoyens. Les journalistes ont eux aussi la responsabilité de nourrir le débat professionnel par des débats internes. Lutter contre les fake news en tant que journaliste, c'est aussi renoncer à offrir une tribune à ceux qui véhiculent, c'est celles et ceux qui véhiculent ces fake news. Hein. Et CNN, vous le savez, a pris la décision courageuse de bannir de ses ondes Kellyanne Conway, qui était alors une des principales conseillères du président Trump, une réaction très saine encore d'un journaliste américain, Keith Olbermann. Ne participons pas au jeu de propagande de Trump. Alors pour terminer sur une note positive quand même, il y a tout de même un effet positif de l'essor des fake news. C'est finalement ce retour à un journalisme qui renoue avec ses principes de base. Le journaliste est le chien de garde de la démocratie. Il ne l'est plus beaucoup aujourd'hui. Peut-être le redevient-il. La crise économique du secteur, la réduction des effectifs salariés dans les rédactions, le remplacement par des freelances qui sont sous-payés, l'augmentation inquiétante de la prévalence du burn-out dans les rédactions, l'intensification du travail dans les rédactions, dans les entreprises de presse, tout ça concourt à une dégradation des conditions de travail des journalistes qui finalement ne sont plus en mesure de jouer le rôle social, le rôle que la société attend d'eux, être ces chiens de garde de la démocratie, être ceux qui demandent des comptes aux détenteurs de pouvoir, quels qu'ils soient. Donc nous avons besoin plus que jamais d'un journalisme pugnace, d'un journalisme indépendant. Nous avons besoin de médias de qualité, de médias responsables, pluralistes. Nous avons besoin de plus de transparence de la part des détenteurs de pouvoir, qui ont aussi leur rôle à jouer contre les fake news. Je ne pense pas que nous avons besoin de régulation, ni de nouvelles restrictions sur les contenus. Les lois existantes, Petra Kammerevert l'a dit, suffisent amplement à poursuivre les contenus illégaux. Merci de votre attention.
Thank you very much. Merci. Our last speaker, Mr. Berger. So we'll also go to the...
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Chair MEP Weidenholzer and MEP Fajon for organizing this with your respective working groups. Thank you for inviting UNESCO. As you said, why is UNESCO here? UNESCO is the UN agency that is dealing with freedom of expression and the media. So, of course, this question is of great interest to UNESCO. It's good to locate fake news in this bigger picture which has been touched on. And I won't spend too much time here, but if you look at the left-hand column, you can see there are 3 blocks about the creation of content, then the circulation of content, and then the editing of content. And if you look in the middle column, you can see who the actors are and what they are involved in. And there I have mentioned governments, because governments are not bystanders in this question by any means. And then you speak about the software enablement. I think this is a good matrix because it covers a lot of different activities, not only fake news. However, let me come to the question of fake news in particular, because fake news covers a lot of these elements. It's about the creation of content, about the circulation of content, and it's about the editing of content, including the hacking and the gaming that I've mentioned over there. And I will spell out a little bit more. So I think it's been made clear also that we're speaking about fake news as a very specific kind of phenomenon within this wider toxic environment, and we should not confuse it with other forms of toxic behavior in the communications universe. It's also important to say it's news. We're not talking about falsity such as Holocaust denial, which is very serious, but this is a different kind of seriousness because it's news. It's about what's happening today. And, of course, as has been said, the uniqueness of this is that it pretends to be news. It's not just a blatant lie. It's masquerading as if it was factual. I think that's an extremely important point to make. In a sense, it's not just fake news, it's faked. In the past tense, it has been faked. Now, of course, we can't isolate it from all these other things because it fits into, it goes hand in hand with cyber abuse, cyber bullying, goes hand in hand with spamming, goes hand in hand with hacking and all these other obnoxious behaviors. So what is it about? Those of you who are my age, you might remember in the 1970s there was an American pop group called the Archies, and they produced a song called Sugar, Sugar. And I won't embarrass you by trying to sing this song, but you may remember, Sugar, Sugar, Honey, Honey, you're my candy girl. It turned out, to the disappointment of teenagers like me, there was no such group as the Archies. They were studio musicians put together to create a fake group. Now, that was disappointing, but it was not consequential. It was entertainment. Now we're not talking about entertainment. We're talking about serious business of news, and that's the point I want to make. This is also not about teenagers just making money. As people said, this thing has evolved. It is not about the sheep who are being misled. It's also about the audiences who are participating in circulating, in the sharing of this in many cases. And it's not also about the partisan media, and it's not about weak journalism. It's about something far more serious and even sinister, and I think that's where it has evolved to. I mentioned here at a UNESCO colloquium we had in February this year. This colloquium raised some very interesting points. The first one here is that this dissemination of disinformation, this is how serious it is. At this colloquium, the chair of the World Editors Forum, he reminded us that earlier this year, the Indian defense minister tweeted, he said, Israel should remember that India is also a nuclear power. He was responding to some fake news which had said that the Israeli foreign minister had said, India better watch out because Israel has some weapons at its disposal. Now you have two nuclear states in some confrontation based on fake news. This is how serious this thing could be. The second part of this is that it's also about discrediting. Now, people have touched on this, and I think that this is really the bigger picture. It's about sowing confusion and sowing trust. Now, not that the news media is innocent here. If you look at the tabloids in the Brexit, many of them were actually creators, not just disseminators. But generally speaking, most mainstream media, even state media, is not in the business of the fabrication of content. They may be in the business of narratives and other stories, but they are not directly that. I'm not saying they're innocent, but they're not the main culprits here. Because the main culprits are those who are weaponizing this kind of tool, and they're doing it because at the end, as was said, it means you don't know what to believe. In fact, then you just fall back on what your networks tell you or what your heart tells you. Your head gets put to one side. What's the effect of this? What it's about? Well, I won't go into detail here, but I think that, as was clear, this is something that's very bad for democracy. It particularly comes out at the time of elections. It's bad for sustainable development, it's bad for science. As we know, the whole fake news around vaccinations is extremely serious in its consequences. It's also bad because of political overreaction, where there's a temptation for political actors to say, we can take the easy way out here. We can just legislate against fake news, and I'll speak more about it. It's also bad for journalists, and it's bad for journalists who are attacked as if they were responsible. As I said, they're not innocent, but by and large, they are not the main culprits in fake news. But they're also sometimes the victims of fake news, where in many countries, journalists are now being presented with news saying, X and X journalist is a spy, as if this was a fact. Or X and X journalist has this extramarital relationship, and so on. Now, once you start using fake news not just to produce an alternative to news, but you are using it to undermine the news, this becomes pretty serious. It's bad also, ultimately, I'm saying at the end of this, for the perpetrators, because you end up in an arms race here of the information wars, which was spoken about earlier. And actually, governments themselves need reliable information. Now, we saw a recent case, not in Europe, but outside of Europe, where the Qatar news agency was hacked, and a news story was put in there, allegedly an interview with the Emir of Qatar, and that was used in this regional dispute that's going on there. These things, once one state starts doing this and another state starts responding, you end up in a very dangerous situation. And even states that are not democracies do need to have some information that is reliable. And that's why this thing needs to be taken with the seriousness that I'm arguing for. So what to do about it? On the one hand, I think it really incentivizes what journalists and the media can do, because if you're in the media business, you're now under a new attack, and you need to strengthen your credibility in order to respond. I won't go through all these, but I will say the training of journalists is super important, because the people producing these things in the most sinister area are highly trained, highly skilled as well. These are not just kids experimenting and doing satire or making jokes. Secondly, I would say what's very important is the transparency. Media, to be credible, has to make its ownership super transparent and how it works, and has to be self-regulatory. I'm pleased to say UNESCO works a lot with the European Union in building self-regulatory structures for media, particularly in the accession countries. And the last thing I've said here is that not to have a vacuum, because when there's a vacuum and the media are not telling stories about aggrieved people, that's when fake news can really find fertile ground. So there's a lot there that I'm arguing that the media itself can do, and in fact is incentivized to do, including media should avoid making links to unverified information, which gives the credibility to stuff that the media really ought not to be promoting credibility for. The last point I want to make is what states could do. This was mentioned before, but I think it's very important to monitor how serious this problem is. Not just this problem of fake news, but also all these other problems of cyberbullying, of misogyny, of hacking, and so on. There really needs to be a hands-on knowledge about what's happening and how this is evolving, and to what extent state actors themselves are involved. Now, the SDG 1610, Sustainable Development Goals, this is the UN's agenda for 2030. Sustainable Development Goals are not just for the developing world, they are for everybody. And I think what's important here is if states are really going to provide public access to information, you don't mean public access to disinformation. You've got to monitor this and report it in terms of what progress the society is making in terms of these issues. Transparency and state involvement, I think, is particularly important where states are themselves deciding they need to do counter speech. In this, particularly if they're not, if they're using hidden identities, if they themselves are involved in that chain of production, circulation, and monitoring. Protect journalists, I've got there. Now, I don't support, and UNESCO would not support, criminalization of false news, because we've seen in other parts of the world this is used really politically to violate freedom of expression, because who's going to judge falsity? And sometimes falsity is not malicious. Second of all, anonymity. As Europe knows, this is part of your right to, corollary of your right to privacy. But it is possible to prosecute when there's fraud, such as, for example, when news goes out, and if it's a tweet or if it's a picture, and it's purporting to be, Le Monde. Well, it's fraud, because it's not Le Monde. So the cases like that, it's counterfeit. It can really be prosecuted under those laws. Incitement, of course, we mentioned hacking. When hacking is done to place false information on websites, that's important. When there's defamation, UNESCO supports civil cases, not criminal cases, so it's not so much a state bringing a case, but where there's defamation in fake news, legal action can be taken. I say this because this is very important, not just for Europe, but what happens in Europe sets a trend for the rest of the world. And if Europe begins to take excessive or disproportionate legal action against this problem, it would justify really abuse of legislation in many other parts of the world. The last thing there is that media and information literacy, which has been touched on. Here, UNESCO does already also work with the European Union on quite a lot of programs to really empower people so that they click wisely, they share wisely, they read before they share, they know what are credible brands, and they know how to check for information. So that's what I've said. To summarize, see the fake news in the wider context, understand its distinctive character, see professional journalism as an antidote. I didn't collaborate with Ricardo, but we used the same word. Promote transparency, not censorship. MIL, media information literacy, monitor it. And we have a study coming out in November which will exactly have a lot of focus on what's happening worldwide on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have a few minutes for questions. At least the next 5 minutes we have interpretation, and then we have to continue in English. Yeah? So we can make it 10 minutes something, and then you are invited for the reception. Silvia. And also if you address to a question to a person.
Can I speak in Italian? Sorry, maybe.
Yeah, so you have to be fast.
Okay, I'm free to speak in my language. Thank you.
You have to be fast. And
thank you so much for this organization. Mi spiace moltissimo personalmente essere arrivata a quest'ora, ma avevamo un incontro molto importante in un altro building a cui dovevo intervenire ufficialmente. Recupererò le documentazioni e comunque c'è una persona per me che ha seguito tutto, perché come Commissione Cultura chiaramente siamo interessatissimi. So che ha già parlato Petra Kammerevert per la Commissione Cultura, ha detto anche che noi abbiamo fatto qualcosa di più sulla responsabilizzazione delle piattaforme, sul riconoscimento dei diritti dei giornalisti, eccetera, e credo che non devo ripetere questo. Però mi chiedo una cosa, questo è un dilemma enorme, condivido che il contesto è più ampio, qui parliamo in particolare del ruolo del giornalista, che a questo punto chiaramente deve diventare un alto mediatore delle notizie, e credo che non ci sia contrasto, questo lo dico alle piattaforme che spesso lamentano che, avendo noi richiesto una qualità di giornalismo e quindi anche un investimento, questo possa ridurre la possibilità di avere giornalismo di qualità nelle piattaforme. Io ritengo che le piattaforme, se vogliono essere credibili e se Internet deve essere uno spazio legale, certo e sicuro e diciamo appunto affidabile, si deve anche investire un po' di più, non solo fare guadagni, ma anche investire di più sulla qualità dell'informazione. Voi avete detto, e chiudo, che non si devono ricorrere a norme più restrittive. Cosa pensate della legge tedesca? Secondo, le authorities nazionali che sono soggetti terzi indipendenti e anche con delle specializzazioni, ritenete che siano soggetti invece che possano e debbano anche intervenire, monitorare ed eventualmente anche chiedere che sia tolto i contenuti di fake news, o ritenete che questo si possa fare solo ex post naturalmente, ma questo non lo ritenete un elemento di ulteriore, certo, normativa, è normativa. E terzo, esiste un problema che riguarda la lesione della dignità e della personale e della spesso messa in discussione della salute pubblica. Noi abbiamo una campagna sui vaccini vergognosa, che dietro anche delle forze politiche che sono anche in questo Parlamento, che antiscientifiche, e che hanno fatto ridurre la protezione della salute dei nostri bambini nel nostro Paese. Di fronte a questo, lei pensa che è sufficiente l'appello ai codici deontologici, ai codici di comportamento e solo alla qualità dei giornalisti, o pensate che invece ci debba essere qualcosa di più?
I think we open now the round of questions, and then we answer it from the podium. Yeah? Who else wants to raise a question? I think translation is still available, or? Okay. Yeah, gentleman here. Could you indicate who else wants to take the floor, just for me? Good.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Sebastian Pensis with URID, the registry for the .eu domain name. And during this debate, one thing that we've mentioned a lot is the role of social media, the roles of traditional medias in fighting against the spread of fake news. But one thing that's been peripheral to this debate has been the role of websites. But we've mentioned Breitbart, Rebel Media, the difference between Le Soir using a .be or a .info extension. So clearly this is something that ties into the fake media debate. And I'd like to ask, in your experience, specifically in fighting the spread of fake news, how have you seen websites or registries and registrars contribute to this fight? What more could they do? And in the most extreme example, I'd like to bring the stormfront.org story of a registrar actually removing a website because it was an incitement to hate. So do you think this should be more spread out, or is this risking to infringe upon people's right to freedom of expression? Thank you.
Take the floor again. Yeah.
Should I answer on this one?
Whoever wants to answer.
Okay.
Yeah.
I found the Stormfront.org question very interesting because in fact is when after Charlottesville, you witnessed this PR thing, you know, when Spotify started hunting down right-wingers and Airbnb and Google and all of these people started, you know, jumping on the bandwagon and started hunting right-wingers, which was impossible by now, First Amendment. I think I think it was a company called, what was it called, Lensflare, Netflare? I can't remember, a tech company from the US. When after Stormfront.org went to Russia, they decided to withdraw a security layer. And this one morning, the CEO of that company just got up and decided to do it. And he wrote a great blog article about it. He said, you know what? Yesterday I went to bed and I didn't want to do anything. This morning I got up, read an article, decided to do it. So who's deciding that I'm withdrawing now the security layer over a right-wing website? It's me, because I'm the CEO, that's it. You don't need any more. So yes, certainly there is need of regulation, but not legal regulation, but also it's essential to have regulations in companies. That's what's my experience right at the moment. Companies have still not understood that they are part of a contextual system in which they play a role also in our civil society. And when even the CEOs of major tech companies don't have a clue or some kind of guideline or some kind of policy how they should interact with right-wingers or left-wingers or whoever, then we see where we are.
Yeah, I mean, just to very briefly add to that, yeah. Clearly, providers of these platforms and hosts of these websites have obligations as well. I mean, there's clearly something of a difference between some of these websites that have been pulled. I mean, I think it is to be welcomed, actually, in the wake of Charlottesville, that lots of platforms have stood up and taken a stand against some of this stuff and pulled the services. But there is clearly a difference between something like Breitbart and Rebel Media, which are producing content that I disagree with, that is manipulative and politically driven with the politics I disagree with, and something like Stormfront, which was actively organising attacks against people and you know, etc. There's fundamental separateness there. And that's the difference. In terms of, that's why I fundamentally agree that actually I think if we're talking about ways to fight back against some of these websites, it is things like financial means rather than regulations, etc. Going after advertisers on these websites. But I guess what I really think is important here is we have to build a wall, if that's not a bad choice of words. We have to build a wall between these platforms and the mainstream. And that's really important. What we increasingly are seeing, groups like us that monitor far-right websites of this sort, is a normalization of them, whether or not it's services being provided, things like Rebel Media, holding events and holding cruises on Norwegian Cruise Line, etc. A normalization of saying that these are acceptable platforms. They should be allowed to exist, but I think that it needs to be clear they are separate from the mainstream. And part of our job as activists, I think, is not necessarily to regulate them, but to make it clear to people that these are marginal forces and that they are extreme or they are a politics that is not acceptable within the mainstream.
Yes, regarding your first question, I didn't say that. What I said is that we don't need additional legal regulation. You know, the internet is already regulated by laws, libel, defamation laws, slander, civil responsibility. So all those laws apply to internet content. So we don't need additional restrictive laws. That's what I said. Let's use the current laws. Maybe yeah, but why do we need additional laws, specific laws on this?
Okay.
I don't see the point.
Thank you very much. I think it was a very long, intensive afternoon with many speakers, many diverse descriptions and very complex issues. So if we try to summarize, is there one answer? No. For sure, it's not possible to rely, as we did, or we had to do, on the self-responsibility of industry. This is not enough. This is important, highly important, but it will not be enough. The question is, do we need legal action, or do we need empowerment of people? And in between these two things, we have to define our policies. To be open, our group is not united on one single policy at the moment, so we are just trying to develop ideas. For sure, we do not want censorship, and we do not need a ministry of truth. So this is not the point. But there is, of course, situations where you need legal action, and the legal actions has to be implemented by the responsible authorities. So if legal action is carried out by private agents, this may become very problematic. So this is one point. And the other point is about empowerment, about giving people chances to raise their voices in this apparently very, very complex world. So we need more knowledge. I think knowledge is not available, not really spread at the moment. And we need to develop models. And I also believe that this discussion will be continued. It will be available on YouTube, so you can also, those people who want to listen back again what one of the speakers said, we also will make available all the documents for you and all the contact details so that you can continue. I can assure that as a political group, we will continue. We will maybe follow it on different aspects. So today this was more the idea of giving an overview. Unfortunately, at the same time, the same location, another political group also decided to organize an event on this, the Liberal group. When we found out it was too late to merge, so we tried to do that, but at the end it was just too late. It shows you that there are many in this house interested in the topic, and that we really have to make it in the remaining months of this mandate as one of the top priorities of our house. We are following, of course, the digital single market, and a lot of the discussions we had are also covered in many of the legislative projects of Commission. We are involved, so we're just discussing e-privacy, which is a very relevant part of the whole thing. And I just can assure you that we will continue. And it is also important that we create a new space for people who want to take part in democracy and at the moment cannot, although the instruments would be there, because you may be right that this is not a new question what we are discussing, but it is certainly new that there are new technologies available which make it easier for many people to get access. And we have a responsibility to make this space available for everybody. Democracy works if people can engage themselves. At the moment, this is a bit flawed, and I think this is one of the challenges we have as parliamentarians, despite our obligations in the legislative work at the moment. We have more than 36 legislative proposals on the table regarding the digital single market, so there's a really big thing. And last point, someone said, what happens in Europe happens everywhere. That's true. Remember the data protection, general data protection, this really set the standards for the globe. So we have a responsibility as European parliamentarians also to develop the standards for the globe, and we have to be very careful what we are doing. So I want to thank the interpreters for giving us some extra minutes, and I want to especially thank the Secretariat for organizing the whole event, and of course all the speakers sharing their valuable time with us, and all the colleagues who intervened. So thank you very much, and you are invited for a round of drinks.
Thank you.
Bleiben in Kontakt. Ja? Bleiben wir in Kontakt. Ja? Nee, wir sollten. Also ich finde es. Ich würde mal ganz kurz meine. Sorted out. Not have a nice role. Yeah?
No, it's the bad.
But it was the guardian of the time. Yeah. He was split the first.